Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jordan Worth. Alex Skeel was born on August 17, 1995 in Kingston upon Hull, into a warm and wealthy family. Alex Skeel also has a twin brother. The twins' health was not good when they were young because they were born prematurely. Despite these health challenges, Alex's intellectual development was not affected, and he was just like his peers. He was even able to actively participate in school sports. From a young age, his parents showered both sons with love and care, investing heavily in their education to give them a better life. After completing high school, both brothers enrolled at the prestigious Bedford College, where they continued their studies. Alex is smart, physically attractive and healthy thanks to his regular visits to the gym. He is quite shy, so he is hesitant to ask women out. In college, Alex met Jordan Worth, a young woman from a wealthy family. Jordan was very popular at college because of her fashion sense. At that time, many boys wanted to compete for her attention. Jordan also spends time volunteering, focusing on fundraising, organizing aid for local animal shelters and helping children in Africa facing famine. Her charitable efforts are contributions to a better world. Alex Skeel fell for Jordan immediately, drawn to her kindness, intelligence, and beauty. Although he thought someone so famous and talented would never notice him, Alex was surprised when Jordan took the initiative to get to know him. They began dating in 2012, when they were both 17. Jordan and Alex, they were called the cutest couple in college. The early stages of their relationship were filled with love, respect, and care for each other. They often showered each other with sweet gestures and exchanged gifts on important milestones. They were often seen smiling and hugging in photos, accompanied by heartfelt messages and declarations of love. To those around them, it seemed like they were destined to be together and begin their journey of lifelong happiness. Jordan and Alex quickly decided to move in together. As students, they relied heavily on the financial support of their parents, who accepted the couple's relationship. Alex's parents even liked Jordan, considering her a responsible and serious girl. Jordan planned to become a history teacher. She had a very good impression on those around her. However, over time, Jordan's behavior began to change. She became more and more controlling of Alex, and the situation got worse. Alex felt pressured to report her every move to Jordan. Jordan checked his personal correspondence, including his phone, emails, and social media, without hesitation. She often exploded in fits of jealousy, but Alex, being in love, tried to ignore this behavior. When Jordan began to choose his clothes, forcing him to wear only what she picked. Over time, Jordan continues to limit Alex's social life. She decides who he can and cannot spend time with, and when, ultimately controlling who he meets. As Alex's relationship with Jordan continued, connections with those around him began to break down. His family and childhood friends were cut off from him, but he seemed oblivious to the situation. Despite their seemingly perfect public image, Jordan was controlling Alex's interactions, deleting his phone contacts without his knowledge and blocking his loved ones. She also responded to messages on his behalf, often being rude and insulting. Jordan would delete chat histories, leaving Alex unaware of what he had said to others. As a result, people began to distance themselves from him. Alex's twin brother noticed that Jordan was preventing them from communicating with Alex. At the same time, their parents also noticed changes in Alex's behavior, causing them to become concerned. Alex began to pull away from his family and those close to him. He stopped visiting, even on holidays. When his mother tried to reach out, she was met with rudeness. On the rare occasions she managed to speak with him, she urged Alex to end his relationship, warning that it would not end well. However, Alex refused to listen and defended Jordan, insisting she cared for him and meant no harm. The family soon discovered that Alex's girlfriend was behaving in a controlling manner. Jordan had convinced him to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. She then controlled his income, spending it on herself and entertainment. Concerned about Alex, his parents tried to intervene and convince Alex to leave Jordan, but he refused to listen to their concerns. In 2013, during Jordan's 18th birthday celebration at a country hotel, Jordan's behavior became alarming. As night fell and the guests began to leave, she disappeared without a word. Alex frantically searched for her, and the next morning Jordan stumbled back to their room, heavily intoxicated. When Alex asked where she had been, Jordan attacked him with aggressive actions and words. 2 months later, at Alex's 18th birthday party, Jordan got into a fight in front of his family and friends. Jordan assaulted a 15-year-old neighbor girl who was an acquaintance of Alex's family and had been invited to the party. Jordan saw the woman's intimate behavior with Alex, and Jordan became angry and attacked the girl by pulling her hair and scratching her face. Although Jordan eventually calmed down, the incident exposed her true nature to everyone present. Alex's parents and brother advised him to end the relationship because of Jordan's aggressive and unreasonable behavior. Alex took their advice for the first time and admitted that Jordan had overreacted. Alex spoke to Jordan that night, telling her that he had decided not to move back into their apartment and would instead live with his parents. After the breakup, Alex continued his studies and continued working, gradually losing contact with Jordan. On New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised Alex by calling to tell her she was pregnant. Alex was surprised and delighted. Jordan apologized for not sharing the news sooner, fearing that he would no longer want to see her. When Alex's parents learned that they were expecting a grandchild, they invited Jordan to move in with them. Jordan accepted their offer and moved in with them. Jordan and Alex eventually got married, and 3 months later, they welcomed a son named William. The young family was initially filled with happiness and contentment. For a short time, Jordan tried her best to please Alex and rekindle the flame of their love. However, when William, their son, was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. As the due date approached, Jordan became increasingly irritable and demanding, insisting that they move out of his parents' house immediately. Attributing her behavior to hormonal changes, Alex finally gave in and rented a place for them in the city. In the summer of 2015, Alex and his wife Jordan welcomed their second child, a daughter named Alice. Alex was overjoyed and felt grateful for his family. However, after the move, Jordan's behavior changed and her controlling nature resurfaced. She forbade Alex from communicating with his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Despite this, she continued to accept financial help from them and would occasionally even ask Alex to request money from his parents. Within a few months of marriage, Jordan psychologically manipulated and dominated her husband, stripping him of his autonomy and subjecting him to her complete control. She frequently belittled and insulted him, gradually escalating the abuse. The situation began when they were renovating their house, and Jordan became increasingly dissatisfied with Alex's efforts. One day, Jordan became angry after Alex expressed his frustration. In a fit of rage, Jordan threw a hammer at Alex's head, causing a deep gash. As Alex clutched his wound in shock and struggled to stay conscious, he begged Jordan for help or to call an ambulance. However, Jordan responded with indifference, telling him to crawl away and die. Jordan then left Alex without help, going into another room to watch television. The next 3 years of Alex's life were marked by non-stop moral and physical suffering. Despite this, his deep-seated depression numbed him to the escalating threats and abuse he faced. He continued working to provide for his family, but his frustration and discontent with his wife grew. Alex endured humiliation at home, being forced to sleep on the floor without a bed, blanket, or pillow, and no longer allowed access to the kitchen. He was forced to eat leftovers, often leaving him hungry, as Jordan controlled his finances, taking all his money, preventing him from buying anything outside the house. Jordan also disrupted Alex's sleep. Whenever Alex fell asleep, she would brutally attack him, hitting him on the head, cutting him, or pouring boiling water on him. As a result, Alex would wake up in excruciating pain, often bleeding or burned. He would then treat and bandage his wounds with whatever he could find, while Jordan calmly returned to bed. Over time, Alex grew numb to this abuse, eventually losing the will to resist. Alex is facing a brutal life, but neighbors and acquaintances believe the couple had a happy marriage. Jordan presented a perfect image on social media by posting old photos with captions expressing her love for her husband and how lucky she was to have found each other. However, the shocking reality is that she violently attacked Alex, knocked out his teeth and cut his arm with a knife, leaving deep wounds. Furthermore, Alex suffered severe burns and was unable to seek medical help, forced to treat his injuries with makeshift items such as plastic wrap and adhesive tape at home. The couple's neighbors frequently heard screams coming from the house, prompting some to call the police out of concern. However, whenever this happened, Jordan would convince the officers that everything was fine and they would leave. During a subsequent police visit, one of the officers noticed that the husband, Alex, had a fresh wound with blood running down his arm. He also appeared malnourished and had various bruises on his face. When Jordan tried to explain that her husband had mental health issues and sometimes harmed himself, the officer was unconvinced. Instead, they called paramedics, and Alex was taken to the hospital. The doctors were extremely worried about Alex's condition when he was admitted to the hospital. He was almost lifeless, and the severity of the injuries, especially on his arms, Alex's body was severely burned, with second and third-degree burns covering significant areas. His physical condition was extremely weak. Further examination revealed that the ligaments in Alex's shoulder were severely damaged, possibly due to repeated beatings. There was also a deep gash on his forearm, and the doctor found that Alex had lost several teeth and had multiple hematomas. At that moment, Jordan rushed into the hospital, insisting on Alex being discharged and emphasizing that she was responsible for Alex's health. Although Jordan insisted that nothing unusual had happened and that these were self-inflicted injuries, her tone did not convince anyone. Therefore, it was decided that she would be taken to the police station for further questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing, maintaining Alex was self-harming. However, when Alex's parents arrived after visiting him in the hospital, Jordan's story changed. She began to describe in detail the abuse she inflicted on Alex, claiming she treated him like a dog and that he couldn't escape her. At the same time, Jordan alleged that Alex's supposed infidelity and deliberate provocation led to her violent behavior. She also stated that he was mentally ill and had a history of self-injury. Alex's parents refuted these claims, but Alex himself was initially hesitant to testify against his wife. It wasn't until after receiving medical treatment and counseling that Alex felt brave enough to share the horrific experiences he endured at home over the years. Jordan wasn't overly concerned about her upcoming trial, expecting at most an administrative penalty. However, after all the testimony was heard, the judge found 22-year-old Jordan Worth guilty of serious charges. These included deliberately causing severe bodily harm, both physical and emotional abuse, and controlling behavior. Jordan was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Not even her status as a mother of 2 young children reduced the severity of the sentence. The court's decision shocked Jordan. Jordan's children remained in the care of their father and grandparents while she served her sentence. After years of recovering from her trauma, Alex now devotes her time to helping others, especially victims of domestic violence. After serving 5 years of a 7.5-year sentence, Jordan is set to be paroled on July 4, 2023. As part of her parole, she is prohibited from contacting Alex Skeel and their children. Jordan has started a new life, is engaged to Adam Steff, and is expecting their child. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Foster family. Christopher Foster had always been considered a success. His mother, Enid, described him as someone who actively pursued financial opportunities from an early age. Along with his younger brother, Andrew, he aspired to follow in the footsteps of their late father, who had been a sales manager. Although they both aimed to become successful businessmen, Chris and Andrew had had a tense relationship since they were children. Andrew later explained that Chris's confidence and assertiveness had overshadowed Andrew's quiet nature. Despite this, both brothers were very close to their mother, Enid. In 1987, Chris married Jill, a housewife, and they had their daughter Kirsty in 1993. Chris's path to wealth began in the late 80s when he worked as a mattress salesman and used inexpensive pizza boxes for insulation. His life changed dramatically after he founded a successful engineering company. This business made Chris a self-made millionaire through the development of an innovative insulation material that became essential in the oil industry. The Piper Alpha oil rig explosion on July 6, 1988, had led to a catastrophic fire that lasted for days and claimed the lives of 167 people. After watching the news, Chris saw an opportunity in this tragedy and identified a market niche for fireproof insulation specifically for oil and gas rigs. Although many oil companies showed interest, they wanted certification of the product's effectiveness before signing a contract. To prove its value, Chris took the financial risk of mortgaging his house to fund an experiment. The test was successful. His product, Overshield, showed exceptional resilience compared to other insulation materials when exposed to fire. It even received a rare A1 fire test rating. Major oil companies quickly placed orders, making Christopher Foster a millionaire almost overnight. Reports suggested that he earned so much money that he didn't know how to spend it all. As his business grew, Christopher's annual turnover increased significantly from £50,000 to £1 million. By 2004, Chris's net worth had been reported to be £10 million. That same year, his wife Jill noticed a house in Shropshire Life magazine. It was Usbaston House, a beautiful mansion in Maesbrook, a wealthy village in Shropshire, England. The estate was 16 acres in size, had its own lake and equestrian grounds. Despite being offered at around £1.5 million, the house still needed repairs. Jill was so intrigued that Chris made an offer the next morning. Foster's family quickly sold their house and moved to Usbaston House. Chris then invested a further £50,000 to install a swimming pool and landscape the property. After settling down, Chris led a lavish lifestyle. He bought 2 Porsches, one for himself and one for Jill, a James Bond-style Aston Martin, Range Rovers, and many other vehicles. Their daughter Kirsty attended a private boarding school and Chris also bought her several horses. Kirsty spent time with her horses when not at school and participated in equestrian competitions. Friends described her as quiet, thoughtful, and kind. In addition, Chris also bought 4 dogs and several pigeons. He further enhanced their lives by hiring a butler and a personal assistant, and the house had antique furniture worth more than £200,000. Chris's most expensive hobby was his passion for shooting, demonstrated by his expensive gun collection, each costing between £12,000 and £12,500, equivalent to nearly $20,000 at the time. Chris often attended shooting parties that could last 3 days, with bills running up to £8,000. He had a habit of leaving guns around the house. Occasionally, when pigeons made a mess of Chris's car, he would shoot them, much to Jill's frustration. In one disturbing incident, when Kirsty's black Labrador began disturbing the sheep, Chris was unable to control the dog and led it down a country road to shoot it in the head. Chris was a successful businessman but lacked a long-term vision. Notoriously impulsive, He craved instant gratification and was quick to cut ties with people who annoyed him. Chris enjoyed being admired and envied by others for his wealth, and social status was very important to him. Over time, both Chris and Jill moved up the social ladder, and it became clear to those close to Chris that he wanted to move away from his roots in Wolverhampton. Jill enjoyed shopping sprees and spent her days doing self-care activities like nail and hair appointments, along with beauty treatments like manicures and Botox injections. Chris and his family regularly went on luxury vacations, staying in luxury hotels and enjoying the best food. These lavish trips could sometimes cost up to £20,000 each, and Chris didn't hesitate to pay. However, unbeknownst to his friends and family, Chris had reached his financial limit and began withdrawing money from his business. His excessive spending had led to financial imbalance, with more money going out than coming in. In 2003, Chris had signed an exclusive contract with DRC, giving them the exclusive rights to produce his oil rig sealant. By 2004, his net worth had been reported to be £1 million. However, by 2005, he owed £2.8 million. Instead of cutting costs, Chris, due to his lavish spending habits, sought more money from other sources. Despite the exclusive agreement with DRC, he signed another contract with another company to sell his products. DRC discovered this infringement and sued Chris, resulting in a lawsuit and DRC acquiring Chris's patent. Chris went bankrupt and in 2007, his company was dissolved. His assets worth £3 million were frozen and his salary was gone. Despite serious financial troubles, Chris continued to act as if nothing significant had happened. At the same time, Chris became involved in a dispute with his accountant, who reported him to the Inland Revenue for tax evasion. Chris had failed to pay VAT, national insurance, and various other taxes. To deal with his increasing tax obligations, he had to borrow from banks to ease his financial strain. In addition, he had mortgaged the Osbaston house 3 times and withdrawn money from more than 20 different bank accounts. Despite his lavish lifestyle and constant spending, Chris still tried to hide the fact that he was deeply in debt. Chris gradually found himself struggling with overwhelming challenges, aware that time was ticking away and fearful of losing everything. However, during a conversation with a friend about houses, Chris insisted that he would never sell Osbaston house. Struggling with the pressure to maintain his flashy and knowing that his time and money were running out, Chris repeatedly sought professional help. He confided in the doctor, revealing his feelings of depression and suicidal thoughts. He started taking antidepressants. In August 2008, Chris came across a letter from his house managers posted on the front gate. The letter reported that they planned to return the following Tuesday to reclaim the house and other assets. The housekeeper said that when she showed Chris the letter, Chris appeared confused but remained silent. The nightmare that Chris had been avoiding had now become a harsh reality. He was on the brink of losing all his material possessions. The thought of Kirsty and Jill losing their familiar lifestyle was unbearable for Christopher. His family faced the possibility of returning to Wolverhampton, saying goodbye to their lavish lifestyle. For a proud man like Chris, such a situation would have been extremely humiliating. On August 21, 2008, a friend contacted Chris via text message to ask about his health, and he replied, "Not good, things are about to happen to me." On August 25, 2008, the Foster's family received an invitation to a barbecue and clay pigeon shooting event. They then joined the gathering. None of the attendees noticed any signs of difficulty in the Fosters. Witnesses recalled that Chris appeared happy. Their family still exuded happiness without knowing what Chris had planned that night. Chris informed Jill that he wanted to leave the gathering. Although Jill wanted to stay a little longer, they eventually left around 8:30 p.m., arriving home just a few minutes later at 8:44 p.m., their route captured by home security footage. Soon after, Jill went to bed. At 11:30 p.m., Chris went upstairs to check on Kirsty, urging her to go to bed while continuing to text a friend online. Around midnight, Chris decided to turn off the internet, causing Kirsty to end her conversation with her friend and go to bed. At 3 a.m., Chris began his violent rampage. He entered Jill's room and used a silencer to shoot her in the head while she was sleeping. Next, he went to Kirsty's room and killed her in the same way. Home security cameras recorded Chris's actions as he carried a shotgun outside the dog cage, killing each dog with a shot to the head. He then went to the stables and killed the horses before burning the stables with the animals inside. Chris appeared expressionless in the video. To prevent firefighters from reaching the house, Chris blocked the main entrance, shooting at the tires to make movement more difficult. He also pumped 200 liters of oil from the family's tank into the house's basement through connecting pipes. It is clear that Chris took deliberate steps to completely destroy the Osbaston house. His actions appeared to have been motivated by a desire to prevent others from acquiring property that he could not keep. Chris burned down his house and covered his car and belongings in oil. The fire quickly spread and destroyed everything. Chris, still carrying a rifle, went back into the house and lay down next to Jill's body in the bedroom, holding her as flames engulfed them. At 4:11 a.m., the security cameras stopped working. A neighbor saw the growing fire and called for help. Firefighters quickly arrived. The fire was too intense and difficult to control. As firefighters tried to put out the fire, neighbors watched the building burn, worried for those inside. In the following days, the media called in to search for Foster's family, but all efforts were unsuccessful. Because of Chris's wealth, the authorities opened an investigation, initially suspecting that the Foster family had been kidnapped. However, at the time, neither the bodies nor the security footage were found, so many speculated about what might have happened to them. It took 3 days for the fire to be completely extinguished. After the fire was extinguished, investigators carefully examined the house and found the bodies of Jill and Christopher on beds in a room that had collapsed into the living room. However, there was no sign of Kirsty. While some hoped she could have escaped, others feared she had been kidnapped. Sadly, Kirsty's remains were found in the rubble a few days later. Investigators used a brush to carefully collect her remains into a hearse. A fragment of Kirsty's skull revealed that she had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, like her mother. After examining the body, the police began to suspect that Chris had committed a crime. At the same time, they began investigating his financial situation. When they dug deeper, they discovered that Chris, a seemingly successful businessman, was actually heavily in debt. His total debt had reached £4 million, and when creditors tried to take his assets, they discovered that Chris had intended to demolish the house to ensure that there was nothing left for them to take. Security footage confirmed the police's suspicions. Chris committed the murders and took his own life without leaving any explanation or warning. Speculation about the motives behind the brutal crime led to two main theories. One theory had suggested that Chris, feeling ashamed of having lost his fortune, chose to commit the heinous act to avoid admitting his failures. Another theory had proposed that Chris, being self-centered, decided to destroy everything rather than face the possibility of loss. However, Enid had disagreed with these theories. She had firmly believed that Chris acted out of love for his family, trying to protect them from financial ruin. She had defended him and felt a deep sense of sympathy for his situation. In contrast, Chris's brother Andrew had held a very different view. Despite not speaking for 16 years, Andrew had briefly considered reconciling with Chris for their mother's sake. However, his fear of a hostile encounter had kept him from reaching out. Andrew had alleged that Chris had bullied and sexually assaulted him during their childhood, leading to a tumultuous relationship. Andrew had maintained that Chris exhibited bullying and controlling behavior. Andrew's attempts to reconcile with Chris in 1999 had been met with resistance. Chris had responded to Andrew's letter with a demand for a written apology, stating that Andrew would have to beg and scrape on bended knee to make amends. Andrew had believed that Chris refused to acknowledge his past wrongdoings and instead held on to long-standing grudges. For months after the tragedy, on December 19, 2008, a joint funeral had been held for 15-year-old Kirsty and 49-year-old Jill at their local village church. The service had been quiet and respectful, attended by close friends and family. Both Kirsty and Jill had been buried in the same plot, as requested by Jill's family. Chris had received a private funeral and was buried elsewhere. In the years following the tragedy, the remains of the burnt-out house and the family's charred belongings had been left on the site. These had included Kirsty's first aid book for her horses and a handwritten note detailing the family's meal plans for the week of the tragedy. The ruins of the house had remained until 2011 when the debris had been cleared. The 16-acre estate had been sold in 2014, with plans to build a new 6-bedroom house. Although the property had been put up for sale in 2012, it had taken 2 years to sell, reportedly after the price had been reduced. The reasons behind Christopher Foster's actions may have been financial struggles and the pressure to maintain a wealthy image. However, this had not justified the horrific outcome. Instead of having made sensible financial decisions or confiding in his loved ones, Chris had chosen a destructive path that had had devastating consequences for everyone involved. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Fusako Sano. Nobuyuki was born on July 15, 1962, in the Japanese prefecture of Niigata. He grew up in a wealthy family. His family's business, related to passenger transportation, was very successful, thanks to his 62-year-old father. Nobuyuki was a late child, with 5 half-siblings from his father's previous marriage. However, he is not really close to them. As a result, he grew up to be a spoiled and demanding child who always expected to get his own way, immediately. Nobuyuki often becomes aggressive when his expectations are not met in a timely manner. One notable incident occurred. He threw a tantrum in a store, punching his mother when she refused to buy him another toy. Nobuyuki struggled to form relationships with his peers due to his complicated and sometimes unusual behavior. He was also self-conscious about his height, which often caused him to hunch over. This behavior caused his classmates to tease him and give him unflattering nicknames. Despite this, Nobuyuki's family resided in a luxurious 2-story European-style house, which featured a spacious room specifically designed for him. The boy was uncomfortable in the room, fidgeting and expressing fear of being alone. This behavior led his parents to take him to see a doctor. After an initial review, he was referred to a psychiatrist who diagnosed him with multiple disorders, a fear of the dark, a fear of germs and dirt, and a unique of autophobia, fear of loneliness, sociophobia, anxiety related to social interactions. Essentially, he feared both being alone and being around others. As a result, he became a loner in high school, never forming close relationships with classmates, and never having a girlfriend despite his attractive appearance. His peers avoided him, and he became an outcast. The only people he felt comfortable expressing his anger and frustration to were his elderly parents, who forgave him and tried to calm him down with gifts and money. As an adult, he struggled to hold down a job. He frequently got into conflicts with colleagues, neglected his responsibilities, and would often leave work in the middle of the day for no good reason, such as when it was raining and he felt sad. On one occasion, he intentionally hurt a female coworker, likely trying to get her attention out of sympathy. Although the incident was attributed to an accident, he was fired immediately. After being fired, Nobuyuki became unemployed and relied on his parents' financial support. Over time, he became increasingly reclusive, rarely leaving his room, and frequently clashed with his parents. Following a particularly intense quarrel, Nobuyuki started a fire in his home, nearly destroying the house and putting its occupants in harm's way. Nobuyuki was later admitted to a psychiatric clinic for treatment, where he was diagnosed with a depressive disorder, uncontrollable outbursts of aggression, and signs of misogyny, extreme dislike and hatred of women. After a little over a month of treatment, he was discharged, deemed not to pose an immediate threat to others. For a brief period, Nobuyuki remained calm and even began rebuilding the partially burned house, adding a couple of new rooms. However, his efforts were short-lived, and he eventually abandoned the construction project. Nobuyuki became increasingly withdrawn and isolated. He spent most of his time in his room, watching TV. He not only forbade his parents from entering his room, but also the second floor of the house. If they tried to cross this boundary, he would violently lash out at them, punching and threatening to kill them. In the spring of 1989, Nobuyuki began taking walks, but he preferred to stroll near a local school where he could secretly watch the female students. At first, he kept his distance and tried not to communicate with anyone. However, one day, he suddenly grabbed a young girl, who was only 9 years old, and threw her over his shoulder as she was leaving the school gate. He then ran to his car, which was parked nearby. The other children immediately screamed for help, and a school security guard and bystanders quickly intervened, rescuing Shi and detaining Nobuyuki until the police arrived. Nobuyuki was unable to explain why he attacked Shi, and it was clear that he had intended to commit a violent and unlawful act against a minor. As a result, he was charged with attempting to commit a violent crime against a child. Nobuyuki Sato avoided a long prison sentence thanks to his father's connections and wealth. In August, Nobuyuki was given a year's probation despite his heinous crime. Shortly thereafter, his name was mysteriously removed from the criminal prosecution database, allegedly due to his father's intervention. However, Nobuyuki's father died shortly after his son's case, dying of a heart attack. Nobuyuki was left with overwhelming shame and guilt for his father's sacrifices and efforts to cover up his crime. After the failure of his first kidnapping attempt, Nobuyuki, 28 years old, tried again a year and a half later. This time, he carefully planned the crime and remained under the police radar for an extended period. On November 13, 1990, Nobuyuki set out on a hunting trip around the city. In the evening, as darkness fell, he spotted 9-year-old Fusako Sano, who had stayed late after school due to a sports event, walking alone on a deserted road. Nobuyuki quickly pulled over in front of her, got out of the car with a knife, and grabbed Fusako. He threatened to slit her throat if she tried to scream or run away. Then, he forced her into the trunk of the car. After driving for a while, he turned into a vacant lot, where he tied Fusako's hands and feet and covered her mouth with tape. When night fell, Nobuyuki drove to his house and took Fusako out of the trunk. Nobuyuki led her through a part of the house that was still under construction to his room, trying not to be seen. He then left the room and re-entered through the front door, as if everything was normal. Once upstairs, Nobuyuki again threatened Fusako with the knife, ordering her to be quiet. He tied her to the bed and warned her that if she tried to leave the room, look out the window, scream, or cry, he would kill her and dispose of her body in the ocean, where no one would ever find it. Fusako was terrified and obeyed the kidnapper's orders, hoping that he would eventually take pity on her and let her go. When Fusako didn't return home from school, her parents started to worry. They knew she had stayed late to watch a baseball game, but as the sun began to set, they expected her to be home by then. Initially, Fusako's parents tried to find their daughter on their own, retracing her usual route from school to home, but their efforts were unsuccessful. As night drew closer, the parents of Fusako turned to the police for help, hoping for a quick resolution. Since Fusako's disappearance, only a few hours had passed, and they were anxious to find her. The police launched a search operation, and by the next morning, they were joined by dozens of volunteers from the local community. The following day, the search party grew to over 200 people, who combed the area, distributed flyers with Fusako's photo, and interviewed passers-by in search of witnesses. Notably, Nobuyuki lived close to Fusako's school and the police station. He had previously attempted to kidnap Fusako, which had brought him to the attention of the police. However, despite this, Nobuyuki was not considered a suspect in the case, thanks to the efforts of his late father. A large-scale search operation was initiated to locate Fusako Sano, a Japanese schoolgirl who had disappeared. The search lasted for many months, covering numerous locations such as empty buildings, houses, railroad cars, and vacant lots. Investigators also searched suspicious vehicles and combed through interstate highways, but found no clues. As the investigation continued, authorities considered various theories, including the possibility of involvement by North Korean special services. However, despite their efforts, the search was unsuccessful, and Fusako remained missing. Fusako later revealed that she was terrified during her captivity and followed Nobuyuki's instructions in the hope that he would eventually release her. However, her captor, Nobuyuki, had no intention of letting her go. For several months, he kept her bound with tight restraints that impaired her blood flow and caused her to lose sensation in her limbs. If she disobeyed or made a sound, he would punish her with a stun gun, beat her, or threaten her with a knife. Notably, Nobuyuki never assaulted Fusako in a sexual manner during her captivity. Instead, he treated her more like a possession or a pet, using her as a means of companionship and conversation. Nobuyuki kept Fusako captive, feeding her a meager diet of food prepared by his mother. As a result, Fusako became severely malnourished and weakened. He restricted her to her bed, forcing her to use plastic bags as a toilet, which he would then dispose of in an unfinished part of the house. Once a month, he would bathe her in a basin, cut her hair and nails, and dress her in his own worn-out clothes. Despite her compliance, Nobuyuki would regularly beat her for his own amusement. Over time, Fusako's spirit was broken, and she became submissive, no longer attempting to escape or even look out the window. As the years passed, Nobuyuki stopped bothering to physically restrain Fusako, and didn't even think to lock the door when he stepped out. He would simply cover her with blankets or towels. Occasionally, he would turn on the radio or watch TV with her, but only to programs that interested him, such as Scottish or sports matches. He also brought her comic books, which he enjoyed himself. These were the only things Fusako had to read during her confinement. For nearly a decade, Fusako was isolated, never speaking to anyone else or leaving her room. She remained in bed most of the time, hardly moving or trying to resist her situation. Fusako had become so resigned to her fate that she no longer attempted to escape or call for help. Nobuyuki's mother lived in fear of her son's violence. For years, she had avoided the second-floor room because Nobuyuki had threatened her with violence. This was not an idle warning, as Nobuyuki actually pushed her down the stairs when she tried to enter the room. She retired in 1996 at the age of 73, and her circumstances became extremely difficult. Nobuyuki regularly abused her, forcing her to follow his rules. Desperate for help, she went to the police in the spring of 1996 and filed a report, stating that she was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of her son. However, the police seemed reluctant to intervene and persuaded her to withdraw her statement, advising her to handle the situation on her own. She also sought help from a public health center, complaining about her son's aggressive behavior and requesting that he be hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation. Her concerns were ignored, and she was told her son's actions were not worth worrying about. Instead, she was advised to encourage him to seek help voluntarily. In January 2000, the elderly woman, exhausted from years of physical and emotional abuse, made a desperate call for help. She contacted the hospital and the police, requesting that they send the medical team and officers to her home. Her reason for calling was that her son, Nobuyuki, had brutally beaten her again, tied her up, and used a taser on her multiple times. Authorities finally responded to Shi's pleas for help and arrived at her house. When the ambulance and police car appeared, Nobuyuki became visibly agitated, aggressive, and resistant. He had to be restrained with handcuffs and sedated with a large dose of medication. Nobuyuki's mother confessed to the authorities that she lived in fear of her son, whose behavior had become increasingly aggressive and uncontrollable. She also revealed that she had not been allowed to access the second floor of her home for years, as Nobuyuki had forbidden it, threatening to kill her if she disobeyed. Upon entering the second floor and Nobuyuki's room, the police made a shocking discovery. A pile of blankets on the bed moved slightly, and when the officers peeled them back, they found a thin, pale, and exhausted girl hiding underneath. When questioned, she identified herself and revealed that she had been kidnapped by Nobuyuki while walking home from school a long time ago. After the discovery, the police brought Nobuyuki's mother into the room to ask if she knew the captive girl. However, she was shocked and claimed she had no idea that anyone else lived in the house besides her and her son. The kidnapped girl also claimed that she had never seen Shi before. During questioning, Nobuyuki made a shocking confession. He recalled the day he saw Fusako on the road and thought she was cute, so he decided to take her home with him. According to Nobuyuki, he took care of Fusako, feeding her, washing her, dressing her, and reading her comic books. He only punished her when she disobeyed him. Nobuyuki also admitted that he loved Fusako like a friend and believed she felt the same way about him. He had no intention of letting her go and hoped she would stay with him forever. He enjoyed spending time with her, talking to her for hours about soccer, music, or his favorite comic book characters, and she would listen silently. Nobuyuki claimed that he never locked his bedroom door, but Fusako never tried to escape, which led him to believe that she was happy living with him. A medical examination concluded that despite his mental disorder, Nobuyuki was able to understand his actions and thus was eligible to stand trial. However, questions were raised about whether his mother could be held accountable as an accomplice. She often bought feminine hygiene products for her son, which raised suspicions. Despite her repeated efforts to alert authorities and get medical help for her family, her concerns were consistently disregarded. The case drew widespread attention before the trial even began, the city police facing heavy criticism. Nobuyuki had previously been prosecuted for attempting to kidnap a schoolgirl. But he had managed to avoid suspicion when he carried out his plan. As a result, the local police chief and the head of the regional police department were removed from their posts for failing to control the situation from the start and making numerous mistakes. Nobuyuki Sato went on trial in May 2000. The prosecution thoroughly examined every detail of his actions, including minor offenses. Nobuyuki was found guilty and sentenced to 14 years in prison, the maximum term. He was released in the spring of 2015 after serving his sentence. By then, his mother had passed away in a nursing home, and Nobuyuki had no other relatives. He was found dead about a year and a half later, in early 2017, in a small rented room. The cause of his death was not disclosed. When Fusako was discovered, she was extremely weak and could barely stand. Doctors diagnosed her with exhaustion, dehydration, and muscle atrophy. She also stuttered, was afraid of sunlight, and had lost most of her communication skills. Her parents didn't even recognize their daughter when they saw her after nearly a decade. It took Fusako about a year to recover physically, but her mental health took much longer to heal. She suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder and became withdrawn, avoiding people. Her intelligence was also affected, remaining at the level of a 9, 10-year-old child. Her parents took her out of town, changed her name to Sachiko Yamada, and refused to speak to the press. Over time, Sachiko made friends, took up photography, and even passed her driver's license test. In 2007, a family outing took a devastating turn when her father accidentally drowned in a pond she tragically witnessed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wang Nan. Wang Nan, born in 1987 in Nanjing, China, a major city and former capital, Wang Nan grew up in a relatively affluent family. Her parents provided her with the best possible education and encouraged her to develop her talents. After completing her secondary education, Wang Nan enrolled in a prestigious university, where she studied business and finance, and also learned several foreign languages. Upon graduation, she landed a job at a large travel agency, where she quickly proved herself to be a valuable, responsible, and motivated employee. Her career advanced rapidly, and she was soon sent to Thailand to head a new branch and oversee its development. Wang Nan worked as a top manager for several years before deciding to leave the agency to start her own business. She opened a Chinese restaurant in Bangkok, which she managed successfully, and it eventually grew into a small but popular chain. Wang Nan was a thriving young entrepreneur who had devoted her life to her career. With her constant business engagements, she barely had time for socializing or dating, and her loneliness became a normal part of her life. At almost 30 years old, Wang Nan was well established in Thailand, having lived there for a while and become proficient in the language. However, she strived for further improvement, taking additional courses to learn Thai at a training center. There, she met a young man named Yu Xiaodong, who initially stared at her before introducing himself in his native language. They exchanged brief conversations, and he inquired about her reason for studying the language. Wang Nan replied that it was for business purposes, and Yu Xiaodong proposed exchanging business cards to potentially meet up someday. Although Wang Nan was not interested in continuing the conversation, she still politely gave him her business card. Yu Xiaodong also gave Wang Nan his own business card, which said that he worked in the import-export industry in Bangkok. Not very impressed, Wang Nan put the business card in her wallet and forgot about it. Yu Xiaodong was the only one who showed genuine interest in Wang Nan, and he wasted no time in calling her the very next day. However, she was preoccupied with work and couldn't spare even a few minutes to talk, so she declined his invitation to meet for coffee. A few days later, Yu Xiaodong asked her out again, but Wang Nan turned him down once more, citing her busy schedule and preparations for an upcoming business conference where she hoped to expand her professional network. Undeterred, Yu Xiaodong showed up at the conference with a stunning bouquet of flowers and waited for Wang Nan to become available. When she was free, he approached her and asked her out once more. This time, Wang Nan was charmed by his persistence, which was a new experience for her. No one had ever pursued her so relentlessly before, so she agreed to meet him for dinner. As it turned out, Yu Xiaodong's interest in Wang Nan was more than just a passing infatuation. He was completely smitten. He showered her with attention, surprise gifts, and romantic gestures, including sending flowers to her doorstep every morning with sweet notes attached. He also called her at least twice a day to wish her good morning and good night. Wang Nan had mixed emotions about the situation. While she was irritated by Yu Xiaodong's all-consuming infatuation, she was also flattered that someone was making such an effort to win her heart. As a result, she found herself unexpectedly entering into a romantic relationship. Yu Xiaodong went out of his way to woo her, not only romantically but also by trying to be perfect in every aspect of their relationship. He shared her interests and opinions, learned to cook her favorite meals, and planned exciting activities for them to enjoy together. He was also eager to help her with her work and household chores at a moment's notice. Wan Nan was over the moon with happiness, feeling as though she was living in a fairy tale. Yu Xiaodong's behavior, however, was moving at a breakneck pace. Despite having only been together for a few months, he was already making plans for their wedding and discussing potential names for their future children. This made Wang Nan uncomfortable, but Yu Xiaodong would counter by pointing out that they were both in their 30s and that it was time for them to start thinking about building a family. That night, Yu Xiaodong wrote a heartfelt letter to Wang Nan, expressing his deep affection and commitment to being a good husband and father. The next morning, he arrived at her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers, reiterating his seriousness about marrying her. Wang Man jokingly mentioned that the courthouse wouldn't open for another hour and a half, but Yu Xiaodong suggested they go there immediately. To her surprise, the courthouse was open, and the officer responsible for registering marriages was already at his desk, ready to formalize their union. Yu Xiaodong had secretly arranged for a hasty marriage ceremony to take place early in the morning. The whole event was unusual and lacking in formality. There were no guests, no exchange of rings, no wedding dress or veil, and no commemorative photographs. Wang Man couldn't shake the feeling that the whole thing wasn't really happening, especially since she hadn't even introduced her new husband to her mother, with whom she was extremely close. Before she knew it, she was holding a marriage certificate in her hand, and her newlywed husband was standing beside her, beaming with satisfaction. Wang Man's marriage was troubled from the start. She had second thoughts about marrying Yu Xiaodong almost immediately after the wedding. Initially, she had hoped he would be a reliable partner, a man she could depend on. Unfortunately, her expectations were not met, and her new husband's true nature soon revealed itself. Yu Xiaodong spent most of his time at home playing video games, using his wife's money without contributing to their household expenses. Whenever his wife asked him why he wasn't working, he claimed his business was slow due to seasonal fluctuations and that he was just taking a break. However, her suspicions grew as time passed, and she decided to investigate his business. Her findings shocked her. His supposedly successful import-export company existed only on paper and business cards. Wang Man was horrified, realizing too late that she should have had a prenuptial agreement. Now, her husband could freely spend her earnings, and if they divorced, he would claim her assets. During a tense conversation, Yu Xiaodong broke down in tears, promising to turn his life around and find a good job. However, it soon became apparent that he had no intention of looking for work and was content to rely on his wife's support. Yu Xiaodong, a grown man, consistently acted like a child. He spent most of his time playing computer games and expected his wife, Wang Nan, to pay for his personal expenses whenever he helped out around the house or assisted her at the restaurant. Wang Nan eventually had enough and told him she would no longer give him money unless he got a job. The next day, Yu Xiaodong disappeared, taking their marriage certificate and Wang Nan's identity card with him. Wang Nan only discovered the missing documents that evening when her accountant called to inquire about a large transfer of funds from her account. She was shocked, as she had not authorized the transfer. However, she immediately suspected her husband's involvement. It turned out that Yu Xiaodong had transferred more than $500,000 into his own account, using the stolen documents to deceive the bank into thinking it was their joint decision to transfer their shared money. Wang Nan quickly reported the theft to the police, who tracked down Yu Xiaodong a few hours later as he attempted to withdraw some of the stolen money. Confronted by the police and his wife, Xiaodong broke down and begged for forgiveness on his knees. He confessed to losing a large sum of money through gambling, which had led to threats of death and demands to repay the debt. This was not his first brush with the law, as he had previously served an 8-year prison sentence for robbery in his home country of China. Wang Man was consumed by shame as she learned the truth about her husband's past. Despite this, she believed that his addiction to gambling was a disease that could be overcome, and she wanted to help him recover and return to a normal life. To support him, Wang Nan agreed to pay off half of his debt and offered him a job as heager of one of her restaurants. Initially, Yu Xiaodong appeared to be grateful for the opportunity and took his new role seriously. He even developed a promising strategy for the restaurant's growth. However, his enthusiasm was short-lived. Before long, he began to spend more time playing computer games and indulging in other leisure activities. Meanwhile, Wang Nan discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with her husband. Yu Xiaodong initially expressed reservations about the pregnancy, and in a moment of hesitation, asked his wife to consider an abortion, which she flatly refused. The disagreement escalated to the point where he threatened divorce and division of their property, but eventually, his demeanor softened, and he apologized for his rash words. Yu Xiaodong later admitted that his outburst was driven by emotional anxiety, but ultimately, he was happy about the impending arrival of their child. However, things took a dramatic turn 2 months later. During a fateful trip, Yu Xiaodong suggested that his wife purchase life insurance, citing the pregnancy as a reason to safeguard her well-being and that of their unborn child in the event of any unforeseen circumstances. This seemingly caring gesture came after a period of harmony in their marriage, where he had been attentive, supportive, and diligent in his role as a husband and expectant father. Wang Nan quickly agreed to her husband's suggestion and even wondered why she hadn't thought of it herself. They purchased insurance the very next day. A couple of weeks later, Yu Xiaodong proposed a vacation to help them relax and unwind. Wang Nan was initially hesitant, but her husband was insistent. He pointed out that they had never had a honeymoon and that traveling with a baby would be difficult in the coming years. He also felt that they needed a break to clear their minds of the stress and negativity they had been experiencing. Wang Nan was eventually won over by her husband's arguments and agreed to the trip. He took charge of planning the entire vacation, choosing the destination, booking the hotel, and organizing activities that would be enjoyable and educational, yet not too strenuous for Wang Nan's pregnant state. Wang Nan was happy to leave the planning to her husband and was pleased to see how much effort he was putting into making their vacation special. On June 7th, they visited the park for the first time and spent most of the day exploring its many beautiful sights and lookouts. However, as the summer evening wore on, the park became increasingly crowded, with tourists everywhere. As the sun began to set, Wang Nan noticed that her husband, Yu Xiaodong, was growing angry and nervous. When she asked him what was wrong, he explained that the crowds were ruining their chance to enjoy a romantic sunset in peace. Despite his initial frustration, Yu Xiaodong tried to make the most of the situation, suggesting that they could still have a romantic moment as the sun set. As the park began to clear out, he climbed the fence of the observation deck and called out to his wife, Wang Nan, to join him, promising her an incredible view. However, Wang declined, citing the darkness and potential danger. Yu Xiaodong became angry but eventually returned to his wife, suggesting that they should come back to the park another time to watch the sunrise together. The Wang Nan and Yu Xiaodong returned to their hotel late on Saturday night, so they decided to sleep in and head back to the reserve early on Sunday morning. As planned, they woke up at 3 a.m. on June 9th and left for the national park while it was still dark outside. Their goal was to catch the first rays of the rising sun. When they arrived, they found the park nearly empty, with hardly any other visitors. They watched the sunrise together on an observation deck. Then, Yu Xiaodong encouraged his wife, Wang Nan, to join him at the cliff's edge to see some ancient rock paintings. Initially hesitant, Wang Nan trusted her husband's assurance that he would help her climb down and back up safely. As they took in the breathtaking view, Yu Xiaodong suddenly asked Wang Nan if she regretted anything in life. She replied that she did not. However, in a shocking turn of events, Yu Xiaodong's demeanor changed. He touched his wife's hair, kissed her cheek, whispered "die" in her ear, and then pushed her off the cliff. To avoid detection, he checked their surroundings to make sure no one had witnessed the incident. Looking down, he couldn't see where Wang Nan had fallen, and the silence indicated that there were no witnesses below. Yu Xiaodong calmly walked towards the park exit, planning to report the incident after his wife was surely dead. However, hikers who had wandered off the trail spotted Wang Nan's body on the rocks and immediately called for rescue, reporting the incident. As Yu Xiaodong was leaving the reserve, several emergency vehicles sped past him, sirens blaring. Realizing what was happening, he quickly returned to the scene, pretending to be distressed. There, he put on a convincing performance, crying and begging for help. Convinced that his wife was dead and no one would discover the truth, he remained unaware that Wang Nan's fall had been broken by tree branches, which reduced her speed before she landed on bushes and then rolled onto the rocks. This series of events cushioned the impact, saving her life and that of their child, although she suffered severe injuries. Yu Xiaodong was overcome with grief, crying and lamenting the loss of his wife and child. However, his wife suddenly regained consciousness and attempted to speak, but was unable to. The people around her noticed the genuine horror on Yu Xiaodong's face, but he quickly composed himself and leaned in close to his wife. In a hushed tone, he warned her in Chinese to remain silent if she wanted to survive. Wang Nan's injuries were severe, including head trauma, multiple fractures, lacerations, soft tissue contusions, ruptured internal organs, and massive blood loss. Her spine was also severely damaged, leaving doctors concerned that even if she survived, she would likely be paralyzed and never walk again. One man spent several days in a coma, connected to life support machines, during which time her husband remained by her side constantly. However, despite his devoted appearance, Yu Xiaodong's intentions were sinister. Every time he was alone with his wife, he thought about how to complete the job without arousing suspicion. His actions were a ruse, hiding his true intentions behind a mask of love and devotion that he examined the devices, but couldn't find a way to quietly disable them. Wang Nan slowly regained consciousness. When she did, her husband was beside himself with fear. He stayed with her constantly, terrified that she would reveal the truth to the police at any moment. When they were alone, he threatened her again, saying he had nothing to lose. During the initial police interrogation, the Wang Nan supported her husband's claim that her fall was caused by dizziness. However, when her husband briefly left the room, Wang Nan asked the nurse to call the police again and prevent her husband from re-entering. It was then that she recounted the disturbing story of her fall, alleging that her husband had attempted to kill her. Yu Xiaodong suddenly burst into the room, shouting that his wife was delusional due to her head injury and that he would never harm her or their baby. His explanation was not believable, and he was arrested on the same day. At the hospital, he was charged with multiple crimes, including attempted murder and intimidation after her husband was taken into custody and sent to jail to await trial. Wang Nan finally felt a sense of relief. Although she still had a long and difficult recovery ahead of her, she now felt safe. Wang Nan initially held on to hope that her pregnancy could be saved, despite the severe fall. However, her medical team advised her to terminate the pregnancy due to the large amounts of painkillers and antibiotics she was receiving, as well as the multiple surgeries she underwent under general anesthesia. The doctors prioritized Wang Nan's life, warning her that the fetus was unlikely to survive the strong medications. This news came as a devastating shock to Wang Nan, but she ultimately followed the doctor's advice. During the trial, Yu Xiaodong vehemently denied any wrongdoing, sticking to his claim that the incident was an accident. He remained calm and composed in prison, hiring skilled lawyers and expressing confidence that he would either be acquitted or receive a lenient sentence. In contrast, the investigators and prosecutor were convinced that Yu Xiaodong had deliberately committed the crime. Motivated by the prospect of collecting a substantial insurance payout and inheriting his wife's fortune, which was valued at nearly $2.5 million at the time. During an interrogation, Yu Xiaodong made a shocking revelation about his motive for the heinous crime. He disclosed that he was angry with his wife for not paying off his entire debt, which had accumulated due to his gambling habit. In his mind, if his wife truly loved him, she would have cleared all his debts since she had the financial means to do so. This perceived betrayal led Yu Xiaodong to believe that his wife did not love him, and therefore, he felt justified in punishing her. After making this astonishing confession, the defendant became silent, seemingly aware that he had revealed too much. He attempted to retract his statement, claiming that he had been misunderstood. Nevertheless, his unexpected admission, combined with Wang Nan's testimony, was sufficient to secure a lengthy prison sentence. In March 2021, Yu Xiaodong was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he and his lawyers filed multiple appeals, and 6 months later, the Thai court showed unusual leniency by reducing the life sentence to 10 years in prison. Wang Nan and her family were shocked and outraged by the lenient sentence given to Yu Xiaodong, believing it would set a bad precedent and encourage others to commit similar heinous crimes. Yu Xiaodong received a sentence of 10 years for attempting to murder his pregnant Wang Nan. As of now, Yu Xiaodong is serving her 10-year sentence while Wang Nan is challenging the court's decision. Meanwhile, Yu Xiaodong is filing appeals to prove her innocence. Wang Nan has successfully restarted her business in 2023 and also established an organization that provides support to women who have been affected by domestic violence. She writes about her personal experiences and warnings for women on her blog. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kirsten Hatfield. Kirsten Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. Kirsten's father left the family soon after her birth, and her mother, Shannon, moved back in with grandparents. When Kirsten was 2 years old, they moved to their own home. Later, Shannon remarried, but the marriage was short-lived, leaving Shannon to care for her 2 young daughters alone. Kirsten, being the older sibling, took on a lot of responsibility, helping her mother care for her younger sister, Faith. Kirsten and Faith shared a bedroom, while their mother slept in the adjacent room. On May 13, 1997, Shannon put her daughters to bed as usual. Kirsten was 8 years old, and Faith was 3. However, Faith had already fallen asleep, so Shannon only said goodnight to Kirsten and left the door to their room slightly open, as she always did, in case Kirsten or Faith needed her. At around 3 a.m., Shannon was awoken by a noise coming from the girls' room. Thinking one of her daughters was awake, Shannon got out of bed to check on them. As she approached the door, the noise stopped. Assuming her daughters had gone back to sleep, Shannon was about to return to her room when she noticed that the door to their room was now completely closed. This was unusual, as she was certain she had left it slightly open. She wondered if one of them had closed the door or if she had simply forgotten to leave it open. Shannon opened the door slightly to check, but she didn't enter the room before returning to bed. Shannon went to wake up her daughters at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, but only found Faith in their bedroom. Shannon asked Faith where Kirsten was, and when Faith said she didn't know, Shannon began a thorough search of the house. However, Kirsten was nowhere to be found. Shannon then checked outside the house and contacted the parents of Kirsten's friends to see if she had come to their house. But no one had seen her. Shannon's search efforts led her to call her father, who lived nearby, to see if Kirsten had gone to his house or not. Unfortunately, he hadn't seen her either. At this point, Shannon realized Kirsten was missing, and her father advised her to call the police. When the police arrived, they initially thought Kirsten might be hiding in the house or had simply wandered off for a walk, given the town's low crime rate. However, upon inspecting Kirsten's room, they found the window slightly open with a few drops of blood on the frame. This raised their suspicions that something more serious had occurred. Further investigation led them to discover a piece of children's underwear stained with blood on the ground outside the window. After confirming with Shannon that the underwear belonged to Kirsten, the police realized they were likely dealing with a kidnapping. More officers were called to the scene to assist with the investigation, which marked the beginning of a more extensive search for Kirsten. The police investigation into Kirsten's disappearance began with a search of the area around the house. During this search, the police spoke with Kirsten's mother, who reported hearing a noise at 3 a.m. and now realized that it may have been the sound of her daughter being taken. Despite the search, nothing suspicious was found, and the police began canvassing the neighborhood, speaking with all the residents. Unfortunately, none of the neighbors reported seeing or hearing anything unusual on the night of the abduction. However, one neighbor did mention being woken up by a barking dog around 3 a.m., which coincided with the time of the abduction. With no solid leads, investigators turned to a child psychologist to interview Faith, who was only 3 years old. Despite her young age, Faith was able to share what she had witnessed, but her statement was limited to a single phrase: "A bad person came and took my sister." This confirmed that Kirsten had not left the house voluntarily, but unfortunately, it did not provide any further information about the perpetrator or Kirsten's whereabouts. Detectives had to restart the investigation practically from scratch. Their initial suspicion leaned towards someone who knew Kirsten well, as it seemed unlikely that a stranger could abduct her from her own room without a sound. Working on this theory, police discovered that Kirsten's mother, Shannon, had a history of drug-related problems. The detectives considered the possibility that the abduction might be related to this. Perhaps the mother owed money to some people in the criminal underworld, and they decided to take her daughter as payment. The police did not rule out the mother willingly handing over her daughter. This would explain why the abduction happened almost silently. The investigation into Kirsten's disappearance continued, with detectives initially speaking to Shannon, her mother. Shannon denied any involvement, claiming to have been clean from substance abuse for some time and insisting she would never harm her daughter. Although detectives were not convinced of Shannon's innocence, they could not find any evidence to prove her involvement. The police then turned to the public for help, using the media to ask for any information that might be relevant to the case. In response, they received hundreds of calls, but most of the calls were fruitless. However, one clue provided a promising lead. A woman reported her boyfriend's suspicious behavior, including aggressive outbursts and a disturbing threat he made during an argument. The police investigated the man and discovered that he knew Shannon's brother, which meant Kirsten might have known him too. Additionally, the man had a history of drug use and assault, and he had previously been familiar with the Hatfield family home. Despite this, the investigation ultimately found that the man had a solid alibi for the time Kirsten went missing. Multiple witnesses confirmed that he was at a bar until around 4 a.m. on the night of the disappearance, making it impossible for him to have abducted Kirsten. Detectives pursued multiple leads, but each one led to a dead end. As time passed, the hope of finding Kirsten alive began to fade. Kirsten's mother, Shannon, refused to give up. She took matters into her own hands, determined to find her daughter. She gave interviews to local media outlets, distributed flyers, and even investigated potential suspects on her own. However, Shannon faced numerous obstacles. Many local businesses refused to display Kirsten's flyers, citing company policies. She also attempted to meet with the state governor, but was unsuccessful. Shannon established a volunteer center to help find Kirsten. The center focused on distributing flyers and engaging with the media. However, Shannon encountered new challenges. Some volunteers stole money, lied about their work, and used the media to gain attention for themselves. Despite these setbacks, Shannon persevered in her search for the truth. After years of effort, Shannon realized that her approach was not yielding results. She enrolled in college, earned a degree in criminology, and became a parole officer. Shannon's goal was not only to find her daughter's kidnapper but also to protect others from potentially dangerous criminals who might be released from prison. Shannon suspected Kirsten's kidnapper had a history of violent crimes. To pursue this lead, she researched people with violent pasts in her area but found no connection to Kirsten's disappearance. Despite her efforts, she eventually had to accept that Kirsten might have passed away and might not return. Still, Shannon continued to search for answers. Periodically, police reopened the case to investigate new leads, working with the FBI to create an updated sketch of Kirsten's possible appearance. In 2014, there was a breakthrough in the Kirsten case. A woman contacted the police and shared a shocking discovery she had made while sorting through her late mother's belongings. Among her mother's possessions was a diary detailing the woman's father's confession, claiming he had killed Kirsten Hatfield. The diary was extremely detailed, and detectives were convinced of its accuracy. According to the diary, the man had kidnapped Kirsten from her bedroom, took her to a house he owned in a nearby town, and murdered her after horribly torturing her. The description of the crime process spanned many pages, leaving even veteran investigators confused. The diary also revealed that the crime had been recorded on a videotape. Investigators immediately questioned the woman's father. However, his reaction was surprising. While he denied any involvement in the Kirsten case, he asserted that he had known who was responsible for Kirsten's death, saying the murder had occurred at his ex-girlfriend's house. The police were confused and asked for the house address. They quickly received a warrant and sent a team to thoroughly search this house. The forensic investigation began with a crucial step: the use of luminol, a substance that glows when exposed to very small amounts of blood. When the forensic team applied luminol to the scene, they were surprised by the results. An expert later described the house as lit up like a Christmas tree due to the numerous bloodstains. The bloodstains matched the details of the murder described in the diary, leading the team to believe they had finally found concrete evidence. To investigate further, police removed the floorboards, cut out sections of wallpaper, and sent these items to a laboratory for analysis. They also organized an excavation team in the hope of finding the victim's body. In addition, the police also discovered a box containing hundreds of videotapes in the house, so they had to review the diary. They suspected that one of the tapes might have contained footage of the victim being abused. Detectives meticulously reviewed each tape, but after hours of analysis, none of the tapes were related to the murder. Excavations also proved fruitless, with no remains or evidence found in the soil. However, just when the investigation seemed to have been gaining momentum, the police encountered an unexpected and shocking episode. Experts who analyzed the bloodstains in the house concluded that the bloodstains had actually belonged to an animal, not a human. This revelation left the police stunned and wondering what had just happened. Had someone deliberately deceived them with a cruel joke? Or was the person writing the diary struggling with mental health issues and convinced by a false narrative that had developed in their mind? The truth was still unknown. Detectives had run out of leads in Kirsten's case, and the case was once again stalled. In an effort to revive the investigation, the case was reassigned to a new detective named Daryl Miller in the summer of 2015. Miller decided to start from scratch and review all existing documents and records. During his scrutiny, Miller discovered something surprising. His predecessors had overlooked some key evidence, including blood found on Kirsten's windowsill and on her underwear. The evidence had been stored in a warehouse, but shockingly had never been sent to a laboratory for analysis. Miller suspected that the reason for this might have been because police initially thought the blood belonged to Kirsten, which would not have yielded any useful results. However, Miller decided to send them to the laboratory for analysis. The results were surprising. The blood sample did not belong to Kirsten, but to an unidentified man. This was a significant breakthrough after many years of investigation. Miller decided to collect DNA samples from all the men who had participated in the investigation since the kidnapping. Police tracked down each person on the list and sent their DNA to a lab for analysis. Everyone was cooperative and provided their DNA samples quickly. Miller patiently waited for the results, and finally he received a call from the lab. Experts had analyzed one of the samples and found a perfect match with bloodstains found on the window and the victim's underwear. The DNA belonged to Anthony Palma, 56. The Hatfield family's neighbor who lived across the street. Anthony had been one of the first people the police spoke to on the day of the abduction. At the time, he claimed to have woken up around 3 a.m. due to his dog barking. Now that his DNA had been linked to the crime scene, detectives decided to bring him in for further questioning. Although the DNA evidence was sufficient for a conviction, the investigators hoped to obtain a confession from Anthony. A confession would expedite the trial and potentially lead them to Kirsten's body, which was still missing. To get Anthony to talk, the detectives invited him for questioning, telling him it was a routine process. They claimed they were re-interviewing everyone, including neighbors, to gather new information. In reality, their goal was to get Anthony to admit whether he had ever been inside the Hatfield family home. Detectives asked Anthony to recall any additional details about the night in question. He retold the same story he had shared 18 years earlier. But this time he added a new detail. He claimed to have seen a white car parked outside Kirsten's house, although he didn't think much of it at the time. The police then asked Anthony about his relationship with Kirsten and her family. He stated that he knew them as neighbors, but he had never interacted with Kirsten personally. He maintained that he got along well with the other neighborhood children, who would often ask him for help fixing their bikes or visit him for candy. This conversation became a critical point in the investigation, as the police had discovered Anthony's blood on the windowsill of Kirsten's bedroom. When they asked if he had ever entered the house, Anthony claimed he had not. This statement raised suspicions, as the presence of his blood suggested otherwise. The detectives faced a challenge. Anthony's blood was fresh, suggesting it had been left recently, but he had had a visit to the house when it belonged to a friend. The investigators decided to move forward with the interrogation. Informing Anthony that his blood had been found in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Anthony repeatedly denied ever entering the house, despite the evidence to the contrary. The investigators attempted to extract a confession, but he consistently maintained his innocence. The detectives changed their approach and exited the room, leaving Detective Miller to speak with Anthony privately. Miller entered with a photo of Kirsten, placing it in front of Anthony. However, Anthony promptly pushed the photo away, refusing to look at it for the remainder of the conversation. Miller asked various questions, attempting to prompt Anthony into a confession, but he continued to deny any involvement. Failing to obtain an admission of guilt, the police ended the interrogation and apprehended Anthony. A subsequent search of his residence, made possible by a search warrant, uncovered no evidence of Kirsten's remains or any other relevant evidence. During the trial, Anthony repeatedly denied any involvement in the crime. But DNA evidence told a different story. As the trial progressed, new details emerged that the police had initially overlooked. It was revealed that Anthony had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior conviction for breaking into a girl's bedroom and assaulting her. He had also been imprisoned in the 1980s for a violent attack involving a weapon. Anthony's past convictions signaled his dangerousness, yet were overlooked in 1997. In 2017, a jury returned a guilty verdict for Kirsten's kidnapping and Kirsten's murder, and Anthony was sentenced to life in prison. Despite the guilty verdict, Anthony never disclosed the location of Kirsten's body. Kirsten's mother refused to give up hope, however. She consistently reached out to Anthony, calling and visiting him in prison in an effort to find out where Kirsten's body was. She spent hours trying to extract the truth from him, but ultimately, she was unsuccessful. Tragically, in 2019, Anthony was killed by his cellmate, who was motivated by a desire for revenge for Anthony's horrific crime against a child. As a result, Kirsten's family's only hope of finding Kirsten's body now depends on hikers or tourists who might stumble upon it in remote national parks, where Anthony may have buried her. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery, the case of Sarah Foxwell. Sarah Foxwell was born on May 18, 1998, in Salisbury, Maryland, into a large family with 2 sisters and 4 brothers. Her mother had 3 additional children from a previous marriage. After her parents divorced, Sarah's mother struggled to care for her children alone. She worked long hours, so the children often stayed with relatives. As the middle child, Sarah played a peacemaking role, usually managing to bring her siblings together despite their frequent arguments. In December 2009, 11-year-old Sarah temporarily moved in with her aunt and grandparents, who lived in a spacious farmhouse on the outskirts of Salisbury. The kids loved visiting their aunt's home, which offered plenty of room to play. On December 22, 2009, the whole family was filled with joy and excitement, eagerly awaiting the upcoming Christmas day. After a pizza dinner, they began getting ready for bed around 9 p.m. Sarah shared a room with her 6-year-old sister, Emma, at the end of the hallway near the back door. The sisters chatted for a bit before falling asleep. The next morning, Sarah's grandfather went to wake the kids, but only found Emma in the room. He searched the entire house, thinking Sarah might have already gotten up, but couldn't find her anywhere. He informed Sarah's aunt, and together they thoroughly searched every room and corner of the house. When they couldn't find Sarah, her aunt suggested she might have gone outside to play in the snow, but her shoes and jacket were still at home. Then, her aunt noticed that Sarah's toothbrush was missing from the bathroom. After searching the surrounding area and finding no Sarah, her aunt called Sarah's mother, who rushed over. They then contacted the police, who arrived quickly and began searching the house. Sarah's aunt explained that she always checked the doors and windows every night before bed, including the previous evening, and the police couldn't find any signs of Sarah inside or nearby. When they learned about the missing toothbrush, the officers considered the possibility of an abduction, thinking the kidnapper might have taken the toothbrush before leaving with Sarah. They then decided to verify if all the doors and windows were indeed locked as Sarah's aunt had claimed. As investigators approached the back door next to Sarah's room, they found it unlocked, despite her aunt's insistence that it had been locked the night before. This discovery raised suspicions, since the family kept a spare key outside, which was now missing. The fact that the perpetrator knew about the spare key shows that he was very familiar with this family. Furthermore, the family's dog, which normally barked at strangers, had remained silent that night. The police launched a massive search operation, fearing that Sarah might have been kidnapped. News of her disappearance spread quickly, prompting many local residents to contact the police and offer their assistance. The police chief has made a public appeal through the media, asking people to check their cameras for any suspicious activity. Dozens of local police officers joined the search, with assistance from neighboring town police departments and police from other states. The police were hopeful that they would find Sarah alive, as the perpetrator had taken her toothbrush, which could indicate that they intended to keep her alive. With this in mind, the police dedicated all their resources to the search. Outside the house, investigators found their first clue, fresh tire tracks in the snow, suggesting the kidnapper had arrived by car. Since Sarah's warm clothing was still at home, it was unlikely the kidnapper had taken her on foot. Meanwhile, at the police station, Sarah's family was in for a surprise. Her 6-year-old sister, Emma, who shared a room with Sarah, whispered to their grandmother that she had seen the person who took Sarah. Emma claimed she had woken up to a man talking to Sarah, but pretended to be asleep, unsure of what was happening. She then saw the man leave the room with Sarah. What Emma said next sent shockwaves through the family. She knew the man who took Sarah. It was Mr. Thomas, the ex-boyfriend of Sarah's aunt. A man named Thomas had a history of violence against women and girls. Despite his criminal record, he spent a lot of time at Aunt Sarah's house and the children got to know him. The police knew Thomas well because he had many criminal records. Thomas first went to prison at 18 for attacking a 12-year-old girl, but he was released early after just a few months. He was sentenced again for assaulting another minor, but he was released early once more, this time after serving 6 months due to good behavior. Thomas continued to exhibit violent behavior, including another assault for which he received a 6-month sentence. He also tried to assault a girl on the same day his wife returned home from the hospital with their newborn baby. His wife eventually divorced him and obtained a restraining order after he threatened to kill her and their daughter. In another disturbing incident, Thomas targeted 2 young girls sitting on a porch. He approached them, claiming he had been watching one of them play in the yard, and called her a wild girl. He then used a stick to hit her on the buttocks, prompting her to run inside and tell her mother about the attack. She recognized Thomas from the window and recalled seeing his face before she moved into the house. She had previously checked the local sex offender registry and found his photo listed. She immediately reported him to the police, and the case proceeded to court. However, Thomas avoided punishment for his actions. Before the trial, she was threatened not to mention that Thomas was a sex offender and had a previous conviction for sexual assault. A few months prior to Sarah's disappearance, Thomas was arrested again for breaking into a 24-year-old woman's bedroom at night, undressing, and masturbating beside her bed. He was released on bail after his arrest. Initially, Thomas hid his criminal past from Sarah's aunt, but she eventually discovered the truth. Despite this, Thomas managed to persuade her that the accusations against him were false and that he was innocent. Detectives are certain that Thomas was the person who kidnapped Sarah. This suspicion was reinforced by the fact that during his relationship with Sarah's aunt, he had spent an inordinate amount of time with Sarah, more so than with the other children in the household. At the time, this behavior didn't seem unusual, but now that Sarah is missing, it appears highly suspicious. To further investigate, the police visited Thomas's residence, a shed located on his parents' property just a few miles away. They brought him in for questioning and obtained a search warrant for the shed. Upon searching, they found it to be in disarray with poor living conditions, but no evidence linking Thomas to Sarah's disappearance was discovered. However, the police did find a large collection of adult magazines and DVDs, which filled the shed. During the interrogation, Thomas denied any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. He claimed that he was struggling with his own personal issues, specifically his tendency to commit crimes against underage girls. According to Thomas, he had made a conscious effort to avoid being alone with the children while dating Sarah's aunt in order to avoid any false accusations. When confronted with Emma's testimony, which placed him at the scene of the abduction, Thomas dismissed her account, stating that she had a history of fabricating stories and that he was not there on the night in question. Detectives were skeptical of Thomas's story. It wasn't just because of his prior convictions. As they questioned him about 11-year-old Sarah's disappearance, Thomas seemed to take pleasure in the situation, smiling and mocking the sheriff. Although it is certain that he planned the crime without any mistakes, the police still work hard to solve the case and find out the truth about what really happened. Thomas claimed to have a solid alibi, stating he was at a bar with a friend until late at night. However, investigators found a discrepancy in his story. Although he was indeed at the bar, he left around 1 a.m. and wasn't seen again until 7 a.m. the next morning. A review of his phone records revealed that he had sent messages to several women, proposing to meet up, but all of them declined. Despite the inconsistencies in Thomas's story, detectives still couldn't gather enough evidence to incriminate him. Their primary concern was finding Sarah, and they poured all their resources into the search. A search of Thomas's pickup truck yielded several crucial clues. Inside, they found Sarah's green toothbrush and a large lollipop, which suggested that Thomas might have used the candy to lure her into his vehicle. Furthermore, the tire tracks on his truck matched the ones found in the snow outside the house on the night of Sarah's disappearance. Thomas had lied about not visiting Aunt Sarah's house for more than a month. This did not deter the police and volunteers from continuing their search for Sarah. They searched extensively, covering many miles around her house, checking abandoned buildings, forests, ravines, and bodies of water. K-9 units and helicopters assisted in the search. The community provided immense support to the police efforts, with hundreds signing up to volunteer. The poor weather and upcoming holidays did not dampen the search, but unfortunately, the efforts yielded no results. The search party resumed early the next morning, with their numbers increasing rather than dwindling. Eventually, the number of volunteers swelled to 3,000 people. Due to the sheer volume of volunteers, the coordination center had to be relocated from the police station to a larger venue, the local baseball stadium. Many of the volunteers brought their children to assist, handing out essentials such as water, hot tea, and food. Despite the odds, the search continued with renewed determination to find Sarah alive. While investigators were questioning Thomas, they received another crucial piece of evidence. After he was brought to the station, his clothes were sent to the lab for analysis. Experts discovered foreign DNA on Thomas's underwear, which they compared to a DNA sample from Sarah's belongings. The results showed a complete match, leading detectives to a disturbing conclusion. It appeared that Thomas had sexually assaulted Sarah after abducting her. Despite the lack of progress in the search, thousands of people gathered on Christmas Day, December 25th, to continue looking for Sarah. Meanwhile, investigators obtained GPS data from Thomas's phone, which showed the cell towers his phone had connected to, although the exact locations were not provided. Police discovered that on the night Sarah vanished, her phone had connected to 3 cell towers, allowing them to narrow down the search area to a roughly triangular zone. Investigators focused on this location, located near the state border, about 8 miles from Sarah's aunt's home. The area was densely wooded, but hundreds of people thoroughly searched every inch of the territory, holding out hope for a Christmas miracle that Sarah would be found alive. Sadly, the outcome was far more tragic. Around 4 p.m., police discovered Sarah's body on the ground, near the state border. She was lying on her back with her arms raised upwards, pointing towards the sky. Medical experts performed an autopsy and were shocked by what they discovered. They confirmed that Sarah had been sexually assaulted and showed signs of strangulation. Additionally, experts found dirt in Sarah's lungs, suggesting that the perpetrator had attempted to drown her in a puddle. During this torture, Sarah lost consciousness. The experts also found evidence that Sarah had suffered severe burns. It is believed that the perpetrator may have left her lying in the forest for some time, went to get gasoline, and then returned to set Sarah on fire. Significantly, traces of smoke were found in her lungs, indicating that she was still alive when the fire was set. This also explains why her hands were raised and pointing to the sky. Likely a reflex reaction to the fire. The sheer cruelty of these actions shocked and horrified everyone involved in the case, including the detectives. After reconstructing the case, the investigators' main goal is to ensure that the perpetrator, Thomas, receives the death penalty. Thomas continued to deny any involvement in Sarah's disappearance, but the evidence against him was substantial. After discovering Sarah's body, Forensic experts found several strands of hair and pieces of fabric from Sarah's pajamas on the front seat of Thomas's pickup truck, further linking him to her kidnapping. Based on all the evidence, it is very unlikely that Thomas will escape punishment. The trial was delayed for over a year, but it never took place. In early 2011, the prosecution offered Thomas a plea deal. Under the terms of the agreement, Thomas would plead guilty and receive a life sentence, rather than facing the death penalty. While this deal may seem lenient considering Thomas's crimes, there were valid reasons for accepting it. A key consideration was that Sarah's younger sister would have to testify multiple times in court, facing the man who had murdered her sister. Sarah's kidnapping and murder were devastating for her family, and there was a risk that the trial's outcome might not bring them the justice they sought. Due to uncertainty about securing the death penalty, the prosecution presented a plea deal. This deal meant that Thomas would not receive the death penalty, and in return, he would plead guilty to the crime. The terms of the deal also ensured that Thomas would not be eligible for early release from prison. Another issue was that the state governor at the time opposed the death penalty. Ultimately, Thomas agreed to the deal and confessed to the detectives, revealing details they already knew. He admitted to tricking Sarah into leaving her house with him, then taking her away, sexually assaulting her, and killing her. As a result, Thomas received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole and was transferred to a maximum security prison. During his initial days in prison, Thomas was assaulted by a fellow inmate with a homemade weapon during lunch, resulting in several severe lacerations. Despite the attack, Thomas survived and was later given increased protection by prison staff. The public was outraged by Sarah's case, which exposed repeated failures in Thomas's custody, allowing him to be released but continue to commit crimes. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamont Springs, Florida. She grew up in a loving family with her parents, an older brother, and a younger sister. Her father worked in construction and often traveled to other states for work, so her mother mainly took care of her and her siblings. Throughout her childhood, Jessica was a cheerful and active girl who loved playing outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a special love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when Jessica was 9 years old, her family planned to visit her grandparents for Easter. While her mother packed for the trip, her father went to the store to buy some vacation items. Jessica asked her mother if she could go to the yard to wait for her father to return. Her mother agreed but told her to stay in the yard and not wander off. The family's apartment complex was located in a quiet area, surrounded by many trees and away from the main road. The neighborhood was considered safe, and children often played outside without regular adult supervision. However, when Jessica's father returned home around 6 p.m., he asked his wife where Jessica was, and she was surprised to learn that Jessica was not in the yard as she had thought. The parents searched the yard but couldn't find their daughter Jessica. Growing increasingly worried, they started asking neighbors if they had seen Jessica. A neighbor reported seeing Jessica sitting on a bench, reading a book, but this information yielded no results. As night began to fall and Jessica was still missing, her parents contacted the police. The police quickly began search operations, questioning neighbors and canvassing the surrounding area. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to find Jessica, forcing the police to expand their search to nearby streets. A few hours later, the police received an unexpected call from an unknown number. The caller's voice was distorted by background noise. But the police determined that Jessica might have been near a water pumping station several miles from her home. When the police arrived at the water pumping station, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Jessica's body was discovered near the pumping station, hidden in a black trash bag. This location was only a few meters from the road, but the pumping station was located under a bridge, making it nearly impossible to detect. Next to the body were some magazines and a children's mirror. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and handed her body over to the medical examiner for further investigation. Investigators turned their attention to tracing the 911 call, which they believed was made by the killer. Their goal was to use the call to identify the killer. However, the call was made from a public phone at a nearby gas station, and when the police arrived, the perpetrator had already fled. Detectives tried to take fingerprints, but it was a difficult task because this was a public phone booth, which likely had many fingerprints from different users. In addition, it was possible that the killer had wiped the phone clean after calling or had worn gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. Further investigation revealed that Jessica may have been killed elsewhere and her body moved to the water pumping station. Evidence on the ground showed that the killer pulled the body out of the car, then put it in a trash bag and dragged it to the water pumping station. Jessica's clothes were still intact, except for a missing shoe, which was not found at the scene. The only potential clue at the crime scene was tire tracks on the ground. There was a possibility that they belonged to the killer's car, so the police took photos and analyzed the prints. Meanwhile, a medical examination of the body showed that the victim died from strangulation, with marks on the face and neck indicating the killer used bare hands. An autopsy showed that Jessica had eaten a hamburger shortly before her death. Her mother said she did not give Jessica a hamburger that day, suggesting the killer may have provided her with food. Additionally, forensic experts found no evidence of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive unknown. Initially, police had suspected Jessica's parents of being involved in her disappearance because they had not had a solid alibi. Jessica's mother had claimed that she had packed up the apartment, and her father had claimed that he had been out shopping, so they clearly had had the opportunity to commit the crime. The police had been confused as to how the killer had been able to get Jessica out of the yard without anyone noticing or her screaming, leading them to believe that the killer might have been someone Jessica knew and trusted, and she might have voluntarily left with them. The killer's voice on the 911 call had provided another clue. In the recording, experts had detected feelings of grief and remorse, suggesting that the killer had truly felt remorse for his actions. The fact that the killer had taken the risk of calling 911 suggested that they might have been trying to minimize guilt or manipulate the investigation. However, the obvious sadness in the killer's voice had led investigators to believe that the killer had likely been remorseful for his actions. The investigation had reached a turning point when police had found a roll of black garbage bags in the trunk of Jessica's father's car, similar to the bag used to dispose of the victim's body. However, expert examination had shown that the bags had come from another manufacturer, eliminating Jessica's father as a suspect. The focus of the investigation had then turned to other suspects. Forensic experts had conducted a thorough examination of the victim's clothes and body, thereby obtaining many clues. One notable discovery had been that there had been a significant amount of dog hair on Jessica's clothes, even though her family had not owned dogs. This suggested that the dog hair might have come from the perpetrator's dog. Additionally, human hair of an unidentified man had been found on Jessica's body, and experts had been working to extract the DNA profile from the sample. However, this process had taken several days. Further examination had revealed two strange fibers on Jessica's clothes that experts had analyzed and determined likely had originated from car seat covers and carpets. This finding had supported the theory that Jessica had been killed at a location other than the water pumping station and then transported there by car. To determine the breed of dog that had shed hair on Jessica's clothes, experts had used the FBI's specialized database, which contained microscopic photos of hair from many different dog breeds. By comparing fur samples with a database, experts had determined that the fur had belonged to a Shar-Pei. This discovery had suggested that the perpetrator might have owned the Shar-Pei and that the dog's fur had been transferred to Jessica's clothes at the perpetrator's home or in the car. According to investigators' initial theory, the killer might have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to buy hamburgers at McDonald's, and then taken her to his home, where she had been murdered. To aid the investigation, experts had tried to improve the quality of the phone call recordings, but this had proved difficult. They had decided to try a different approach and sought help from NASA, which had advanced audio enhancement tools originally designed for use in space recordings. NASA had agreed to assist and provide police with higher quality audio. However, experts still needed to sample the suspect's voice to compare with the call recording. Detectives had suspected that the killer might have known Jessica, so they had played the call recording for her mother, hoping she could recognize the voice. At first, she had said the voice was familiar but couldn't place it. When she had heard it a second time, she suddenly had realized that the voice belonged to a neighbor who had lived in their complex. Although she couldn't remember his name, she had told detectives that he often had taken his Shar-Pei for walks in the yard. Police had quickly identified this man as James Crow, 35 years old. Hours after Jessica had disappeared, investigators had questioned her neighbors, including James Crow. James had told them that he had seen Jessica in her yard while walking his dog, Pumpkin, a Shar-Pei. They had exchanged a few words and then he had left. Detectives had looked into his past and had found no history of criminal activity. He used to be a truck driver, but had been currently unemployed and had spent most of his time walking around the neighborhood with his dog. Detectives realized that the similarity in voice and breed of dog had not been enough to arrest James, so they obtained a search warrant for James' car. Inside, they found two disturbing clues. Under the front passenger seat, they discovered an empty Happy Meal bag, which was suspicious because James had no children and Jessica had had a McDonald's hamburger in her stomach. Additionally, the car had brand new tires that had barely been used, which James had claimed to have changed on the day Jessica was murdered. However, his previous tire had not been very old and could have lasted a few more years. Police investigated further and discovered that one of James' old tires had been left behind at an auto service. When they compared the tire tread pattern to prints found near Jessica's body, they did not match. However, it was possible that tire marks on the ground did not belong to the killer's car but to another vehicle. Police also searched James' apartment, where they found a box containing several rolls of trash bags similar in size and color to the one found on Jessica's body. To determine if there was any connection between the bags, detectives needed to find a way to prove that they had come from the same manufacturer. At first, this seemed impossible, as the bags had no distinctive markings or features and there were hundreds of manufacturers of similar products. The detectives had an idea to solve this problem. They contacted Roberts, a quality control specialist for the company that had manufactured the bags found in James' apartment. Roberts pinpointed the factory that had produced the bags based on a special code on the cardboard box containing the rolls. The code indicated that the product had come from a facility in Virginia. Roberts explained that a small amount of iron or titanium was added to the bag's composition, depending on its color. Because the factory produced bags in many different colors, the materials used in production changed constantly, causing the ratio of plastic and iron or titanium to change daily. To take advantage of this information, experts used high-intensity X-rays to measure the presence of iron and titanium in the plastic of handbags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene. This analysis provided exact ratios of elements, which were identical in both bags. This suggested the bags had been made on the same day and possibly from the same batch. However, there was more to the story than that. During the production of garbage bags, microscopic debris accumulated on the machine and imprinted on the plastic sheets as they were rolled out. This created a unique stripe pattern on each bag, visible to the naked eye. Even though the debris on the conveyor belt was constantly changing, creating a new pattern every few hundred feet of fabric, the results were consistent enough to provide another possible lead in the investigation. The similarity of the bags suggested that not only had they been produced in the same batch, but they had also been produced within a short time frame, perhaps just a few hours apart. Comparison of the bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene revealed a striking match in the lines and patterns on the bags. On further inspection, experts showed that the bags had been rolled into bundles by machine, which could have created irregularities during the rolling process. Although these irregularities were hardly noticeable, they could be detected by examining the edges of the bag, where the folds formed a unique pattern. Upon re-examining the bags, experts discovered that the pattern on the bags at the suspect's apartment matched the pattern at the crime scene. Further analysis also revealed that fibers found on Jessica's clothing had matched the carpet in James' apartment and the upholstery of his car seat. An audio expert had also analyzed the 911 call recording and compared it to James's voice sample, concluding that the voice in the recording belonged to James. Although the evidence was only circumstantial, detectives still believed in James' involvement in the case and decided to arrest him. James was taken into custody, and the prosecution announced its intention to seek the death penalty. Despite James continuing to deny guilt, the case still went to trial. The prosecution presented its theories, highlighting James' frequent outdoor activities with his dog, which had earned him the trust of local children, including Jessica. According to police, James had met Jessica while walking his dog and had struck up a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's, and she agreed because she knew him. After the meal, James allegedly invited Jessica to his home. While his wife was away, evidence had shown that Jessica was actually at James's house that day, as fibers from his living room carpet were found on her clothes. The investigation revealed that James might have tried to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Forensic evidence indicated that the killer had strangled Jessica with their bare hands and pressed their palms against her face, possibly to silence her if she tried to scream. Panicked, the killer then placed Jessica's body in a trash bag and transported it to their car without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. The killer dumped her body near a water station, called 911 from a nearby gas station, and returned home. During the preliminary hearings, James's attorneys attempted to defend the evidence, arguing that there was no concrete proof of James' guilt. Although the judge accepted the evidence, the defense pointed out that in murder cases, the standard of proof is higher and more direct. Therefore, the possibility that James could avoid the death penalty was very large. A plea agreement was offered to James based on the circumstances surrounding the case. The deal required him to plead guilty to second-degree murder and accept a sentence of 40 years in prison without parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. 2 years after the murder, in the summer of 1998, James accepted the deal. Although he was not required to provide details about the crime, he said that one of the reasons he accepted the deal was to spare Jessica's family the torment of the trial. The prosecution believed James showed genuine remorse for his actions and used the 911 call as evidence. The purpose of the call was unclear, but it suggested James was trying to alleviate his guilt. However, Jessica's parents were not satisfied with this deal because they had hoped for the death penalty and wanted James to confess to the crime. Despite this, James remained silent about the details of his actions. James did not fully serve his sentence. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49 from health problems, taking with him details of his crimes and... Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Gerardo couple. Jenner Gerardo was born December 19, 1970, in the city of Fort Wayne, Allen County, Indiana, USA. She spent her childhood and teenage years in the area. Jenner graduated from Bishop Luers High School, where she achieved excellent results in advanced courses. She then attended Purdue University at Indianapolis, studying communication and actively participating in the theater arts program. Later, she continued her communication studies at Butler University. Jen Eyre earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication and Theater Arts. Throughout her career, she worked in marketing for various Indiana companies, including roles in Carmel and Indianapolis. Notably, she served as marketing manager at Cercier Instrumentation for several years. In the summer of 1986, Jen Eyre met Mark Gerardo in Fort Wayne, Indiana. At the time, they were both teenagers, and Jen Eyre was working at a local Taco Bell. Mark was immediately drawn to her, captivated by her striking blue eyes and bright smile. Mark was initially unable to express his feelings to Jen Eyre. The romance between Mark and Jen Eyre only really began when they met again by chance after 4 years, at a nearby shopping mall where Jen Eyre was working. He began visiting her frequently, and one day, she encouraged him to make a move, asking him directly when he would take her out. Jen Eyre's confidence and willingness to speak her mind drew Mark to her. He described her demeanor as the opposite of his own, admiring her boldness. Melissa Murphy, a childhood friend of Jen Eyre's, recalled how excited Jen Eyre was when she first met Mark, saying Jen Eyre was convinced he was the one and would do anything for him. Mark and Jen Eyre got married on October 23, 1993, when Mark was 25 and Jen Eyre was 23. Their relationship, which began in adolescence, continued to flourish into adulthood. Mark reflected on their happiness together, saying he couldn't imagine spending his life with anyone else. However, like any couple, Mark and Jen Eyre faced challenges in their marriage and had to navigate the low points together. Mark said the arguments between him and his wife were very tense, and Jen Eyre always won because she wanted to be the one to make the final decision. Mark's high school friend, Mike Hartman, shared that although he wasn't privy to all the details of their relationship, he knew they had fierce disagreements. Despite their strong marriage, the 2008 financial crisis significantly impacted them. Mark later mentioned that it changed everything, and money became a major source of stress and arguments. In November 2011, they relocated to Greenville, South Carolina, where they found new marketing jobs. Exploring the state's beautiful landscapes brought them closer together, and their marriage experienced a renewal. However, their renewed life came to a halt in 2017. Jen Eyre lost her job, leaving her struggling to find a new one, and she was no longer the strong, confident woman she once was. Around this time, the couple felt it was time for a change and a fresh start. They decided to move to Delaware, and Mark began looking for a job right away. He came across a job posting at the University of Delaware for a creative director in the marketing department, a role that would come with supervisory responsibilities. Mark emailed his application and quickly received a response from a woman 15 years his junior, who would be his supervisor if he got the job. She invited him for an interview. Initially, Mark was nervous about working under someone 15 years younger than him, but his worries soon disappeared after meeting Meredith Chapman. This was their first encounter. At the time, Meredith was 33 years old and originally from Pennsylvania. She had graduated from the University of Delaware with a bachelor's in communication and a master's in education. She was married to Luke, a former New York City councilman, and they lived in Fairfield Crest, Delaware, with their dog Indy. The couple had married in 2009. During his interview, Mark was immediately drawn to Meredith's beauty and intelligence. He recalled thinking, "I have to work for this person," within 5 minutes of sitting across from her. He found her articulate, energetic, and passionate about her job, and was impressed by her accomplishments at such a young age. Meredith seemed impressed by Mark, as she immediately offered him the job. Mark gratefully accepted the offer and moved to Wilmington, Delaware in November 2017. His wife, Jen Eyre, stayed behind in South Carolina to lease out their home. Mark was excited about the new opportunity and the chance to advance his career. Unbeknownst to him, this marked the start of the demise of his marriage to Jen Eyre. Mark spent 45 days living alone in Delaware, getting to know Meredith better. They discovered they had a lot in common, and she invited him out for a drink one evening. Mark found it easy to talk to Meredith and opened up to her about his marriage to Jen Eyre, sharing some of his personal struggles. He also told her about the loss of his parents and brother. Mark was unaware of what was happening between him and Meredith at first. Mark stated that he really hadn't known what was happening. He admits that he feels affection for Meredith and expresses that being with her is a wonderful experience. After their dinner date, he started to understand his feelings and realized he was attracted to her. As Mark spent more time with Meredith, the issues in his marriage became more apparent. He began to compare Meredith to his wife, noting that Meredith praised him and made him feel appreciated, which was something his wife never did. Mark was really touched by Meredith's compliments. Mark was deeply attracted to Meredith, but he felt guilty about betraying his wife. As a result, he initially attempted to end his relationship with Meredith. However, he couldn't shake off the feelings he had developed for her, especially after learning that Meredith was unhappy in her own 9-year marriage. Mark explains that his relationship with Meredith is great, which made it difficult for him to shut down the relationship. He wanted to understand what drew them together. Before Jen Eyre joined her husband in Delaware, Mark and Meredith had already confessed their love for each other. Mark felt it was natural to express his love for Meredith, as the feeling was powerful. In December 2017, Jen Eyre moved north and noticed Mark's distant behavior. She soon confronted him, sensing that he might be involved with another woman. Jen Eyre asked Mark what was going on with him and said that he was acting different. Jen Eyre specifically mentioned Meredith because Mark often mentioned her when discussing new job. Although Mark initially denied the affair, Jen Eyre continued to question him, aware that something was amiss between him and Meredith. She began to closely monitor his activities. Mark is confused as to why Jen Eyre knows the private aspects of his affair with Meredith. Around Valentine's Day in 2008, Jen Eyre collected evidence that her husband was having an affair. However, this came at a cost. Mark discovered that Jen Eyre had hired a company to hack into his phone, allowing her to read his texts, view his photos, and access his call records with Meredith. Mark confessed to Jen Eyre that he had developed feelings for Meredith, unable to continue the deception. Jen Eyre, heartbroken, but determined to save their marriage, asked Mark to attend marriage counseling with her, and he agreed. However, during their second session, Mark discovered a recording device hidden in his jacket. Initially thinking it was an anti-theft device, he realized it was actively recording him. Furious, Mark confronted Jen Eyre. She claimed she wanted to understand the extent of his relationship with Meredith and suspected they were planning something together. This has been marked the beginning of the end for Mark and Jen Eyre's marriage. Mark eventually told Jen Eyre that he intended to file for divorce in May 2018, once he had met the residency requirements in Delaware and could leave their shared home. During this period, Meredith Chapman's life was on an upward trajectory. She had landed a new role as assistant vice president at Villanova University in Pennsylvania and relocated to Radnor Township. Meanwhile, her marriage was coming to an end, paving the way for her to pursue a relationship with Mark. As Meredith and Mark's relationship deepened, Jen Eyre, was Mark's wife at that time, began consulting with divorce coach Sheila Brennan. Jen Eyre was struggling with feelings of bitterness and anger, stemming from being replaced by a younger woman. Her concerns were compounded by financial uncertainty, having moved north without securing a new job. Jen Eyre's situation continued to deteriorate, ultimately taking a toll on her mental health. Mark noticed her distress and suggested that she see a psychiatrist for professional help. He also encouraged her to reach out to family and friends, as she had mentioned suicidal thoughts and even threatened to jump out of a window. Mark stated that Jen Eyre appeared to have come to terms with their upcoming divorce. She walked up to him with a list of things she wanted him to do in the weeks before he officially moved out. Her requests included activities such as going on hikes, having dinner together, and generally spending quality time as a couple. Mark agreed to fulfill her requests, thinking it would help Jen Eyre be in a better emotional state. During this time, Jen Eyre appeared to be acting normally, although she would occasionally become emotional and break down in tears. Over the next few weeks, Jen Eyre started posting on the app Nextdoor. She was looking for recommendations for a good marriage counselor who could help couples that were close to getting a divorce. In her post, Jen Eyre specified that they needed a counselor with extensive education and experience in handling complex issues such as infidelity, depression, traumatic experiences, and child-parent dynamics. However, unbeknownst to Mark, Jen Eyre had secretly been planning her revenge. On the night of April 23, 2018, Mark and his wife Jen Eyre were scheduled to meet at a restaurant to discuss their divorce agreement. However, Jen Eyre sent Mark a series of messages, first saying she was running late, then telling him to go home as she wouldn't make it to the. Mark got up to leave, but minutes later, he received a disturbing picture from Jen Eyre, an image of trash with a condom in the middle. This led him to believe Jen Eyre was rummaging through Meredith's trash can outside her home. More text messages followed, including one that said he had ruined co-life. Jen Eyre's next messages were even more ominous, saying she hoped he never found happiness and she had said goodbye to Mark. Alarmed and fearing for Meredith's safety, Mark tried to contact Meredith multiple times, but all his calls and texts went unanswered. Worried about a confrontation between Jen Eyre and Meredith, Mark rushed to Meredith's house. What he found was far more horrific than he had anticipated. Upon arrival, he discovered Meredith lying face down on her kitchen floor. Around her head was a pool of blood. Nearby, he also found Jen Eyre's lifeless body on the floor. Mark shouted in shock and ran to Meredith. He said, "Baby, oh baby, what have you done?" Meredith had excitedly posted on her Instagram about her new job at Villanova less than 2 hours before she died, expressing her excitement. According to Meredith's 5:42 p.m. post, after just 1 week on the job, she's already earned the love of fans at NOA Nation. Later that evening, she arrived at her home on Lowry Lane in Radnor Township, parked her Audi in the driveway, opened the door, and walked inside, unaware that Jen Eyre had broken in and was hiding, waiting to attack her. When Mark got there, Tim, one of Meredith's neighbors, was present. He mentioned that he heard a commotion and went out to see what happened. Mark asked him to call 911. Sergeant Christopher Four of the Radnor Township Police Department said the call made his heart sink. Sergeant Christopher said they don't usually get calls like this. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic with a lot of police present. Mark, who appeared out of breath according to Christopher, was put in an ambulance before being taken to the police station as a suspect. After questioning Mark and discovering that the gun used in the 2 deaths was under Jen Eyre's body, the police concluded that Jen Eyre had broken into Meredith's home, killed her, and then committed suicide. The police received a tip from witness, who claimed to see a woman in a trench coat, hat, sunglasses, and possibly a wig watching the house with binoculars. They also found a set of car keys at the crime scene that were traced to a Cadillac rented by Jen Eyre. Mark was surprised to learn about the Cadillac. He said he learned most of this from the police and the news. Jen Eyre had rented the car 2 weeks before the incident, and it was parked just outside their apartment. Mark continued his investigation by examining his wife's bank statements, phone records, and computer backups, discovering that she was leading a double life. After Mark confessed to his affair shortly after Valentine's Day, he found out that Jen Eyre had opened a secret bank account and credit cards. She used these cards to buy audio surveillance equipment, a lock-picking kit, computer hacking software, and DNA testing kits for his clothes. Mark also revealed that she purchased advanced GPS tracking devices and attached them to both his and Meredith's cars. Mark stated that he had found over 400 images of private conversations between Meredith and him from text and Snapchat, and that Jen Eyre would access his phone in the middle of the night. On March 20, 2018, 5 weeks before committing the murder, Jen Eyre bought the gun she used in the murder and suicide. Her credit card statements showed that she practiced shooting the gun 3 times at a firing range. Mark claimed that Jen Eyre had secretly placed several recording devices in his clothes. He discovered files containing hundreds of hours of audio recordings his wife had not only recorded but also transcribed into notebooks. According to Mark, Jen Eyre had taken all his jackets and embedded multiple devices, constantly switching them in and out. Every day, she would remove a device, download the recorded content, and then sew it back into his jacket, repeating this process for weeks. It was revealed that on the night Jenner killed Meredith and herself, she emailed a letter to her family, chillingly explaining her motive. She had begun the letter weeks prior, dating her entries, and described how it was an act of revenge for what he had done to her, saying, "That's as simple as it gets." Dr. Robbie Ludwig, a psychotherapist who studied marriage-related homicides and Red Letter, suggested that Jen Eyre may have been driven to kill Meredith and herself because she could not bear losing Mark. Dr. Robin commented that, in his opinion, there was something about listening to the recordings that made Jen Eyre angry and upset. Dr. Robin went on to say that Jen Eyre found the strength to act because she believed that her suspicions about her husband's character were correct. However, when she became suicidal and lost hope in life, she became more dangerous. It seemed that she had arranged everything to make her husband suffer. In a TV interview with Dr. Ozark, Mark shared a shocking revelation. Jen Eyre had written a 15-page letter, confessing that if he had walked in on the crime scene, she would have killed him as well. He acknowledged that he had hurt Jen Eyre, and his greatest regret was making her feel trapped and without options. He deeply wished he could travel back in time and erase the hurt he had caused. He confessed that his love for Jen Eyre had remained strong and never disappeared. Mark explained that he drove by Meredith's house multiple times as a way to cope with his emotions and come to terms with what had happened, helping him to process his feelings and move on. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Brianna Zunino Dennison. Brianna Zunino Dennison, born March 29, 1988, Brianna's parents are Jeff and Bridget Dennison. When Brianna was 6, her father passed away, causing immense pain for the family. However, with the support of her loved ones, she persevered through the difficult time. Brianna spent her childhood in Reno, Nevada, and Mendocino, California, her mother's hometown. Her love of travel and exploration took her to numerous countries, including Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France. Brianna has a deep affection for children and animals, especially her dog Ozzy. She completed her high school education at Reno High School in 2006 and is majoring in child psychology as a sophomore at Santa Barbara City College. During winter break, on January 20, 2008, Brianna returned to her hometown of Reno from Santa Barbara to spend time with friends and family. Brianna and her friends regularly attended events organized by Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, a tour company that caters to college students. They also attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Gala weekend in Reno. That day, Brianna returned home around 4 a.m. to her friend's house near the University of Nevada campus. Brianna slept over at McKay Court's house. However, when McKay Court woke up the next morning at around 9 a.m., Brianna was no longer there. A small bloodstain was found on the pillow where she had slept, and her cell phone, purse, and shoes were still at the house. McKay Court then contacted Brianna's parents and the local police in an attempt to locate Brianna. Police arrived and examined the scene. In the following days, police conducted forensic tests at the McKay Court home, where Brianna had been staying at the time of her abduction. During the investigation, police discovered DNA on the doorknob that belonged to an unidentified male. The blood on the pillow was confirmed to be Brianna's. leading police to focus on a theory that Brianna had been abducted. Police searched for Brianna in the University of Nevada, Reno area, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the search. A DNA sample found on a doorknob the night Brianna disappeared was matched to at least 2 previous sex crimes in the same area. One occurred on November 13, and the other on December 16, 2007. On January 29, 2008, a Reno woman said she knew a victim who had been held at gunpoint in a garage on the University of Nevada, Reno campus in October 2007. Police released a description of the suspect based on identifying information provided by women who were sexually assaulted by the suspect. In an effort to find Brianna's abductor, police interviewed nearly 100 sex offenders who lived within a mile of the McKay Court home. However, none of them were linked to Brianna's disappearance. A search effort was organized, with some 1,700 volunteers, including then First Lady of Nevada Dawn Gibbons, participating in a virtual search of the area. Sadly, the search yielded no results. On February 15, 2008, a man named Albert Jimenez was returning from his lunch break at a Subway restaurant in Reno. As he walked down the street, he noticed bright orange sheets standing out among a pile of discarded tree branches in a ditch near Reno Business Park. Upon closer inspection, Albert discovered that the orange socks on the feet belonged to a deceased woman. Albert had heard about Brianna Dennison's disappearance but initially thought the description did not match the person on Brianna's missing person flyer. Without a cell phone, Albert rushed back to his workplace to contact the police to report the incident. Police arrived at the scene and confirmed the victim's identity as Brianna Dennison. The investigation revealed that Brianna had been brutally attacked and murdered. Near her body, police found a pair of panties, which contained DNA from the perpetrator and DNA from an unidentified woman. Police suspected that the panties did not belong to Brianna, believing that they had been left there to distract police. Police then made a public appeal, asking anyone who recognized the panties to come forward to help identify the perpetrator. However, no one came forward. On November 25, 2008, James Michael Bella, 27, of Sparks, Nevada, James was arrested while he was taking his son to the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno. He was booked into the Washoe County Jail on charges of murder, first-degree kidnapping, and sexual assault. Further investigation revealed that James was a former Marine with a history of violence, including a 2001 arrest for threatening his ex-girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. The following day, November 26, 2008, the Reno Police Department held a press conference to confirm that James' DNA matched the DNA found at Brianna's crime scene. During the press conference, it was also revealed that a friend of James' girlfriend anonymously accused James, through the secret witness program on November 1, 2008, after James' girlfriend confided in the friend that she had found underwear in James's truck while they were returning from Washington, where James had taken a job in March 2008. After reports of Brianna's case appeared in the media, including a police sketch of the suspect and a description of a vehicle involved in a similar incident a month earlier, police began questioning James, anonymously provided by a witness. However, James denied any wrongdoing and refused to provide a DNA sample for analysis. His girlfriend was also questioned by police, and she allowed them to take a DNA sample from her and James' 4-year-old son. DNA testing of James' son showed that, in this case, James' DNA was left at the house where Brianna was abducted and at the scene of the rape. Furthermore, during the trip to Washington, it was discovered that James had sold his truck in Idaho, which matched the description of the vehicle used in the sexual assault. Police announced at a press conference that the truck was being transported back to Reno for a thorough examination and would be used as evidence in the case against James. On May 27, 2010, the jury returned a guilty verdict in James's trial, finding James responsible for the murder of Brianna Dennison. After 9 hours of deliberations, the jury convicted James of kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. In an effort to avoid the death penalty, James' defense team presented mitigating circumstances, citing James' traumatic childhood with an alcoholic, abusive father. The jurors rejected the mitigating factors and gave James the death sentence instead. Later, on July 30, 2010, James received 4 more life sentences for other crimes, including rape and kidnapping of 2 victims prior to Brianna's abduction and murder. James's appeals have been denied over. The case of Brianna Zunino Dennison is a story of pain, strength, and determination in the pursuit of justice. Brianna's family remains strong and persistent in the fight for justice. The collective efforts of everyone together make a safer world. And may Brianna rest in peace. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of the Parente family. William Michael Parente was born on July 20, 1949, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. His parents, Willie and Rulon Parente, raised him with values rooted in their family's history of law enforcement. His father, a New York trooper, played a significant role in shaping his upbringing. As an only child, William received his parents' undivided attention. He spent summers enjoying the sun with his family in Long Beach. William pursued his education at Brooklyn College and Brooklyn Law School, thanks in part to the financial support of his uncle, Anthony J. Russo. William worked in his uncle's Manhattan law office on the Avenue of the Americas. There, he built a reputation as a thoughtful lawyer and dedication to his family. William was known for his demeanor, courteous, which extended to everyone. He worked diligently for long hours, but made sure not to overwork himself. Unlike many of his peers, he refrained from using profanity or engaging in post-work gatherings for drinks. His disciplined lifestyle and commitment to kindness set him apart in the legal community. Even on difficult days, William maintained his composure and treated everyone with respect. In 1977, after being admitted to the New York bar, William married Betty Mazzarella. He began his career at a prestigious Wall Street law firm but made a significant change in 1988. When Betty became pregnant with their first child, William decided to start his own private practice. This change happened around the same time the family moved to Garden City, New York, an affluent community in Nassau County, Long Island. Despite living in the suburbs, the William family remained connected to their Brooklyn roots. They regularly returned to their old neighborhood to enjoy local delicacies, reconnect with old friends, visit their mother, and relive cherished childhood memories. By the time he was 60, William Parente had become an experienced estate and tax attorney. He ran his practice from an office in a Queens shopping center. His wife, Betty Mazzarella, 58, dedicated her time to taking care of their home and organizing charity fundraisers in their local community. Betty was actively involved in church activities, which were an integral part of their neighborhood's social fabric. The couple had 2 daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. Stephanie, the elder daughter, was 19 years old and a sophomore at Loyola College, studying speech pathology with plans to pursue dentistry in the future. Her friendly nature made her well-liked by her classmates and teachers. She also maintained close relationships with her friends back home in Garden City. Their younger daughter, Catherine, showed remarkable talent at just 11 years old, earning her admiration from teachers and staff at Garden City Middle School. Her exceptional abilities indicated a promising future ahead. In the later stages of his legal career, William became involved in what he called bridge loans. He acted as a financial intermediary, similar to a bank, allegedly using assets from investment portfolios under his management to finance these loans. When an investor asked for their money back, William Parente was unable to return the funds or explain why he couldn't. On April 15, 2009, William, along with his wife Betty and youngest daughter Catherine, took a trip to visit their eldest daughter Stephanie in Towson, planning to surprise her. They booked room 1029 at the Sharon Hotel, near the Talon Town Center Mall, with a reservation until the 19th. When they arrived, Stephanie's friend was surprised, given that classes had just resumed after the Easter break and Stephanie was busy preparing for a chemistry exam. The visit was unexpected, especially since the parents had already planned to visit on Friday the 17th to discuss Stephanie's study abroad plans in England. Despite the initial surprise, the visit seemed like a normal family reunion. However, what took place that day remains unclear. Based on the evidence, here is what happened. Betty Mazzarella Parente was the first victim. She was brutally assaulted and suffocated in bed on Sunday morning. Later, Catherine, the youngest daughter, met a similar fate, dying from the same violence as her mother. Catherine's body was placed beside her mother's. On Sunday afternoon, Stephanie arrived at the hotel after leaving her campus and tragically met the same demise as her mother and younger sister. Her body was laid beside theirs on the bed. None of the victims showed signs of struggle. No evidence of drugging or physical restraint was found. William Parente carefully planned the annihilation of his family. On that somber Sunday, around midnight, one of Stephanie's close friends and roommates grew worried about her absence from their dorm room. After hours of worrying, the roommate called the hotel room phone to reach Stephanie. The roommate knew Stephanie planned to return to the dorm to study for final exams, so they were surprised when William Parente, Stephanie's father, answered the call. William explained that Stephanie was staying at the hotel with family. The roommate accepted this excuse and ended the call, unaware that Stephanie was already dead. Later, the roommate thought back on the conversation and remembered that William's tone seemed unusual. On Monday morning, William Parente ended his life by using a knife he had bought at a nearby mall. He inflicted fatal injuries on himself in the hotel bathroom. When the family failed to check out, hotel staff became concerned. School Loyola College also raised concerns about Stephanie's unexplained absence from classes, especially since it was a crucial time for her final exams. The college contacted the hotel, requesting a welfare check on Stephanie and her family. At 3 p.m., a housekeeper tried to enter their 10th floor room but found the door locked and received no response. The housekeeper alerted other staff, and a hotel manager entered the room. The manager found William Parente's lifeless body in the bathroom, having taken his own life with a knife. The manager quickly called emergency services and continued to investigate. As he entered the room further, he found 3 bodies carefully arranged on one of the beds. The victims were Betty Mazzarella and her 2 daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. The Baltimore County Police were immediately called to the scene, and all other guests on the 10th floor were relocated as part of the investigation. The police also took the family's Mercedes-Benz SUV from the hotel parking lot. After investigating, they determined that William Parente had committed a murder-suicide on that Sunday. And the police found that the causes of death were asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. They believe that Betty and Catherine were the first victims, followed by Stephanie. The police think that one of William's last interactions was with Stephanie's boyfriend, who tried to call Stephanie around midnight. However, Stephanie had already been killed by her father by then. Shortly after the call, William likely went to the bathroom and took his own life using a knife he had bought earlier from the mall. It is believed that William Parente's decision to kill his family and then commit suicide may have stemmed from an investigation into his possible involvement in a major fraud. William Parente was accused of being part of a Ponzi scheme, a type of investment scam where money from new investors is used to pay existing ones, often resulting in huge financial losses. Investors have been scammed of around $20 million, with one investor claiming a loss of $450,000. Investigations showed that William had issued bounced checks totaling $245,000 to investors, leading to further complaints to the New York Attorney General's office. After William Parente's death, Some investors came forward with losses totaling millions of dollars. A colleague of Williams made a poignant observation: financial losses can be recovered, but the loss of human life is irreparable. Friends and family have struggled to overcome their feelings of grief following the horrific incident. A memorial service was held at Loyola College on Monday night to honor Stephanie's memory. The family William Parente home, once full of life, became a somber space filled with tributes such as flowers and candlelit vigils. A funeral service was held at St. Joseph's Church in Garden City to commemorate Betty and her daughters. According to reports, Catherine's middle school classmates were transported by bus to attend the service. Stephanie's college peers made a significant effort to join, driving from Talon and arriving as early as 4 a.m. for the morning ceremony. The family was laid to rest together at St. Charles Cemetery in East Farmingdale, New York. In contrast, William Parente received a separate, private funeral service at a different location. He was cremated, but the location of his ashes was not publicly disclosed. The horrific actions of this merciless perpetrator have caused immense distress for the victims and their loved ones. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Vincent Brothers. Vincent Brothers was born on May 30, 1962, in Long Island, New York. From a young age, he was known for his charisma, reliability, and diligence. He also served in the Marine Corps Reserves. After graduating from Norfolk State University, Vincent moved to California in the mid-1980s to pursue further education and eventually earned a master's degree. Despite having a successful career as a school administrator, Vincent's personal life was marred by tumultuous relationships. His 2 previous marriages ended in divorce. In 1988, while working at California State University in Bakersfield, Vincent had a daughter with his girlfriend. He took his girlfriend to court to establish paternity and was eventually awarded custody and visitation rights. Initially required to pay $350 per month in child support, this amount was increased to $771 in 2003. That same year, Vincent was convicted of wife abuse and received a 6-day jail sentence and probation. In 1992, Vincent married for the second time, but this marriage also ended in divorce in 1996 due to accusations of intimidation and physical abuse by his second wife. While serving as the assistant principal at Emerson High School, Vincent was accused of sexually harassing a colleague. The woman claimed that Vincent assaulted her at his home and took her phone to prevent her from calling the police. When she tried to report the incident to the police, she said police discouraged her from pursuing charges because she was afraid of Vincent's reputation. The harassment continued at school, with Vincent allegedly touching her inappropriately. The woman eventually resigned from her job as a teacher, citing an unfriendly work environment. The school district investigated Vincent due to his increasingly threatening behavior and threatening phone calls. Despite Vincent denying the allegations and having no disciplinary record, the school district transferred him to another school as a precaution. Vincent then began working at John C. Fremont Elementary School in Bakersfield, California, where he also became famous and respected. Vincent was especially known for ensuring the safety of students by taking them home after school. While teaching at Fremont Elementary School, Vincent met Joni Harper, the school's security supervisor and basketball manager. Vincent and Joni began dating and eventually married after the birth of their first child, Marcus. Their family grew with the arrival of their second child, Lindsay, in 2000. However, Vincent's infidelity caused him and Joni to divorce in September 2001. 2 years later, Vincent and Joni remarried in secret, and their third child, Marshall, was born 4 months later. Joni eventually opened up to her friends about the problems in her marriage. Unlike before, she expressed her fear that Vincent might harm her. However, to those around them, Vincent's family appeared happy and actively involved in the community, often attending local events and maintaining good relationships with others. From the outside, Joni and Vincent's marriage seemed stable. Joni continued to work as a basketball manager, pursuing her passion. However, no one expected that the tragic events hidden behind the family's happy exterior would soon emerge. 3 months before the tragic event, Vincent had moved out of the house due to frequent arguments with his mother-in-law, Ernestine. On July 6, 2003, Joni attended a church service with her 3 children, Marcus, Lindsay, and 6-week-old Marshall, as well as her mother, Ernestine. The family had lunch at Black Angus after the ceremony, then returned home for a nap. As was their custom, Joni and the children stayed in one bedroom, while Ernestine stayed in another room in the house. Tragically, the family was attacked in their home. The killer easily entered the house without signs of forced entry and shot Joni twice in the head while she was in the bedroom. Lindsay was also shot in the back. The noise alerted Ernestine, causing her to quickly arm herself with a .38 revolver and move toward the hallway to investigate. Unfortunately, she was killed before she could defend herself. The attacker shot Ernestine twice in the face, causing her to collapse in the hallway outside her bedroom. The attacker then entered the room and shot Marcus, followed by a fatal shot to the baby's back. Each shot was aimed very carefully. Instead of fleeing the scene immediately, the attacker went to the kitchen to get a knife and then returned to the bedroom. There, the attacker stabbed the victims multiple times in the back. On July 8, 2003, Kelsey Spann, Joni's best friend, became worried when she had not heard from Joni, Ernestine, and Joni's children since they went to church the previous Sunday. Kelsey decided to go to Joni's house to check on them using the key Joni had given her. When she tried to unlock the door, she found it difficult to open due to an obstacle. She then went to the back of the house and found an unlocked sliding glass door, which was unusual. Upon entering the house, Kelsey discovered Joni, her mother Ernestine, and Marcus, Lindsay, and Marshall, all dead. Kelsey immediately contacted authorities at 7 a.m. They arrived at the scene and discovered 5 family members brutally murdered. The family's peaceful home, located in a quiet neighborhood, became the scene of a horrific crime. The police investigation concluded that the family had been tragically killed on Sunday afternoon as they returned from church. Before leaving the scene, the perpetrator covered the bodies in the bedroom with blankets and pillows taken from other rooms. Detectives identified Joni as the primary target due to the severity of her injuries, suggesting the attacker had been extremely angry. Police were concerned about Vincent's safety and discovered he had been in Ohio. Detective Watts traveled to North Carolina, where Vincent was visiting his mother with his brother Melvin. When North Carolina police met with Vincent, they found him severely traumatized and unable to speak coherently, which did not provide many details about the investigation. Vincent's behavior was inconsistent with that of a murderer, and because he had been on the other side of the country when the murder occurred, police initially ruled him out as a suspect. He also provided receipts showing purchases made around the time of the tragedy, confirming that he had not been in Bakersfield, California, where the incident occurred. However, Detective Watts still doubted Vincent's innocence. Notably, Vincent never asked how his wife and children had died, which aroused suspicion. On July 11, 2003, Vincent had returned to Los Angeles without attending their family's memorial service, but Vincent had attended their funeral 5 days later. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Vincent had moved out of his family home in April 2003. Additionally, his wife, Joni, had been planning to divorce him again and had sought child support. Authorities also discovered that Vincent had had a history of violence against women, which had led them to take a closer look at his alibi. Upon further investigation, surveillance video from the store's checkout counters had shown that Melvin, not Vincent, had made the purchase at that time. When confronted, Melvin revealed that Vincent had told him to make these purchases in Vincent's name. Despite their efforts, police were unable to find any witnesses who had seen Vincent between the evening of July 4th and the evening of July 7th. Both Melvin and his family insisted they had not seen Vincent during this time. Although there was no direct evidence linking Vincent to the murder, police discovered he had some suspicious activities. Vincent had rented a car when he had arrived in Columbus, Ohio, and he had stayed at his brother's house. Police suspected Vincent had flown to Columbus on July 2, 2003 to visit family, then returned to Bakersfield on July 4th, where the tragic incident had occurred on July 6th. He was supposed to return to Ohio on July 7th and had arrived late that evening. Law enforcement had conducted a thorough inspection of the Dodge vehicle, paying special attention to its radiator and air filter. To help identify insects found in the car, investigators had enlisted the expertise of Dr. Lynn Kimsey from the Bohart Museum of Entomology at the University of California, Davis. Dr. Kimsey carefully had analyzed the insects and identified more than 100 species, including several species found only in the western region beyond the Rocky Mountains. The presence of some insects suggested that Vincent had moved at night. By carefully analyzing the insects, Dr. Kimsey had been able to plot a path that showed the car had traveled west from Ohio. Investigators later had tracked down the 5 previous car renters and confirmed that none of them had driven the car to California or near the Rocky Mountains. Police also had examined photographic evidence and found the end of a rubber glove in the laundry room. DNA testing showed a match. It belonged to none other than Vincent Brothers. Detective Watts had discovered that Vincent had been planning to leave town and had begun selling his assets, including putting his house on the market. As a result, Vincent had been arrested on April 30, 2004 and charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. The trial began in 2007, with prosecutor Lisa Green leading the case. The prosecution argued that Vincent's motive for the murder had been financial, suggesting he had acted out of fear of having to pay child support due to his impending divorce from Joni. The prosecution portrayed Vincent as a serial adulterer who often had disappeared for long periods of time and who could become violent. To support their case, the prosecution called several witnesses, including Dr. Lynn Kimsey, who testified that the insects found in the Dodge were consistent with insects commonly found along Interstate 70. This testimony was further supported by evidence showing 5,424 miles had been driven from July 2 to July 11 in accordance with the prosecution's statement. However, when Melvin had appeared in court, he tried to change his previous testimony, claiming that he had lied to the police about Vincent giving him a credit card to use. In response, the defense presented an expert on high-speed driving, who argued that maintaining an average speed of 70 miles per hour during the trip from Ohio to California had been extremely difficult. The defense also presented its pathologists, who testified that the murders could have occurred as late as Monday morning, July 7, 2003. The defense also had presented interrogation tapes to prove that Melvin had been pressured by police to change his statement. Additionally, they called a witness who claimed to have seen a car accident involving Vincent on Sunday morning, in which a boy on a bicycle had collided with Vincent's rental car at an intersection. Although the incident had not been reported to the police due to the lack of damage or injuries, the prosecution attempted to verify the story. Vincent had taken it upon himself to defend himself. He had strongly denied all accusations about his married life and had firmly denied the accusation of murdering his family. Throughout his testimony, Vincent had become emotional and had shed tears several times. The prosecution had called Carla Tuya, principal of Franklin School, as a witness. She had testified about her past relationship with Vincent, which had begun in 1996 when his son was born and had ended in 2002 when she had decided to end it. Carla revealed a shocking secret that she and Vincent had been intimate just weeks before the family tragedy, directly contradicting Vincent's previous denials about everything. This admission had damaged Vincent's claim to fidelity to his family. The prosecution had argued that the crime had been carefully planned in advance. Thanks to knowing the family's Sunday habits, the murderer had gained an advantage and had had the opportunity to strike. The perpetrator had taken advantage of this and had waited until the whole family was asleep, then had used the spare key to enter the house through the sliding glass door and had killed each family member. On May 15, 2017, Vincent had been found guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder, making him eligible for the death penalty. The jury had reached this decision after hearing testimony from 137 witnesses and deliberating for nearly 2 days. After the verdict, Vincent had been removed from the courtroom and had been returned to the Luro detention facility under tight security. Then, on September 27, 2007, Durr County Superior Court Judge Michael Bush had sentenced Vincent Brothers to death by lethal injection. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Petit family. The Petit family was viewed as a model family due to their stable economic background and well-behaved children, earning them genuine admiration from those around them. William Petit, the father, was a standout athlete in high school, particularly in basketball, where he demonstrated natural leadership skills. He was also the top student in his class, going on to earn a law degree from Dartmouth University. However, William's true passion lay in helping others, caring for the sick, and making a positive impact on the social. After completing his law degree, he decided to pursue a career in medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. It was during his 3rd year of residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh that William met Jennifer Hawk, a nurse specializing in oncology and co-director of the Health Center for a pre-graduate internship program. They fell deeply in love, with those who knew them confirming that they were perfectly suited for each other. The couple got married in 1985. 4 years later, they had their first daughter, Haley. Her birth inspired them to have a large family, which prompted them to purchase a house in Cheshire, Connecticut. On November 17, 1995, their second daughter, Michaela, was born. Following childbirth, Jennifer resumed her work as a nurse and internship co-director. However, she was later diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a chronic disease with no cure that would follow her for the rest of her life. Her family remained supportive throughout. At 10 years old, Haley started raising money for the Multiple Sclerosis Society, generating significant funds over time. Michaela also performed well academically. And when Haley went to college, Michaela planned to take over the fundraising efforts so she could continue supporting their community. The summer before, Michaela had learned to cook and she enjoyed preparing meals for her family. Tragically, this daily activity leads the family to an encounter with a criminal. One July evening in 2007, Michaela was preparing dinner, but she needed additional ingredients. She and her mother went to the nearest market, where they coincidentally encountered Joshua Komisarjevsky, a man recently released from prison. Joshua had experienced a traumatic and complicated childhood. He was born to teenage parents. He was put up for adoption a week after birth and adopted by the Komisarjevsky family, renowned artists in Europe known for their strict and religious upbringing. Joshua had a high IQ, but struggled in school, prompting his parents to decide that homeschooling was a better option. During his trial, Joshua revealed that he had been sexually abused by a cousin in his childhood, but his family chose not to address the issue. This traumatic experience contributed to the development of his rebellious personality. At the age of 14, Joshua was accused of abusing his sister. Around the same time, he committed his first burglary. In 2002, he was arrested for 18 charges of burglary and resulting in a 9-year prison sentence. During the trial, he gave a chilling confession, revealing that he enjoyed invading other people's private space, enjoyed the feeling of being close to them while they slept, and found particular satisfaction in making others feel insecure. Released on parole in 2007 at the age of 27, officials deemed Joshua a danger to society, describing him as a perverted individual and disturbing behavior. Despite these warnings, the jury declared him fit for release. Following his release, Joshua stayed in a residence for ex-convicts, where he met his accomplice, Stephen Hayes. Hayes had spent a significant portion of his life in prison, starting with his first incarceration at the age of 16 in 1980. He was frequently arrested for violent robbery and burglary, and after being sentenced in 2004, he was granted parole in 2006, which led him to the same halfway house where he met Joshua. On July 22, 2007, Joshua trailed Michaela Petit and her mother as they traveled to a nearby market to purchase. He paid close attention to and noted specific details about Michaela's vehicle, facial features, and blonde hair. After completing their shopping, Michaela and her mother returned home, having no knowledge that Joshua had been following them. Later, Hayes sent Joshua a text message indicating he was impatient to start and needed a drink soon. Hayes asked if their plan was still on, to which Joshua confirmed to be yes. When Hayes asked how much longer he had to wait, Joshua told him he was busy putting his child to bed and advised Hayes to be patient. Hayes responded by expressing his eagerness to proceed. Meanwhile, Joshua secretly follows the Petit family in his car to find out the exact location of their house. The whole family was enjoying a nice dinner together, but they unaware that it would be the last time they would all be together. Later that night, while everyone was asleep except for William Petit, who had dozed off in the living room, their peace was disrupted by strange noises inside the house. William remembered feeling groggy, in pain, and unable to think clearly. Joshua and Hayes had entered the house through an unlocked door, initially planning to rob the family. However, upon finding a baseball bat, they used it to brutally beat William, who remained conscious despite the assault. One of the intruders threatened to shoot him if he moved. William was then restrained with ropes, tied to a pole in the basement. Joshua and Haley proceeded upstairs to Haley's room, where they found her sleeping. They tied Haley and Michaela to their bedposts, covering their heads with pillowcases. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Jennifer Petit had fallen asleep, but was soon woken up by Joshua and Hayes. They controlled Jennifer by tying her hands and feet, feeling that they now had control of the house. Joshua and Hayes then took their time to thoroughly inspect the house, and even stopped to smoke cigarettes in the living room. After collecting valuables such as jewelry, cash, Joshua and Hayes decided it was time to leave. It seemed the Petit family's ordeal was finally over as they heard the burglars leave the house. However, their nightmare was far from over. Joshua and Hayes sold the items at a pawn shop, but after realizing they hadn't made as much money as they expected, their greed drove them to return to the house. When they returned to the Petit house, they discovered a check register with $40,000 and decided to steal a total of $155,000. Once back, they informed Jennifer of their plan, threatening to kill her entire family if she didn't comply. Desperate and prioritizing her daughter's safety, Jennifer reluctantly agreed to accompany Hayes to the bank the next morning. Meanwhile, Joshua took advantage of Jennifer's absence to enter Michaela's room. He untied Michaela, undressed her, and took photos with his cell phone. He assaulted her, recording the act. Afterward, Joshua took her to the bathroom to clean her, aiming to eliminate any DNA evidence. He ordered her to put her pajamas back on and tied her up again. The evidence that Joshua raped Michaela was found during her autopsy. State Medical Examiner Dr. Wayne Carver discovered Joshua's DNA in Michaela's body. At the bank, everything initially seemed to go smoothly. However, Hayes failed to notice Jennifer's actions while she was in line. Before approaching the teller, Jennifer wrote a note on a flyer asking for help. The note read that her name was Jennifer Petit, she needed to withdraw $115,000 from her savings account, and that her family was in danger, so Jennifer asked them to call the police, or her family would be killed. The teller gave Jennifer the money despite her lack of identification. With the cash, Jennifer left the bank and returned to the car with Hayes. The bank employee immediately called the police to report the incident. However, the manager told the 911 dispatcher that Jennifer had indicated the home invaders were being nice and only wanted money. Cheshire police received a report from the bank and they set up a vehicle perimeter around the area without alerting the suspect. From a distance, the police observed the situation without intervening. Meanwhile, back at the house, Joshua told his accomplice about his actions towards Michaela, implying that he could easily harm Jennifer as well. Hayes then grabbed Jennifer, pinned her to the ground, and started removing her clothes. William heard his wife being assaulted upstairs and managed to flee. One of the intruders responded, "Don't worry, it's all going to be over in a couple of minutes." William crawled to the basement stairs and eventually made it to the backyard. William thought the intruders would shoot them all soon, so he knew he had to act fast. Joshua checked on William but found he had escaped. According to Hayes' confession, Joshua told Hayes that William had gotten away while Hayes was raping Jennifer in the living room. Upon hearing this, Hayes strangled Jennifer to death while continuing to assault her. Shortly after, they heard William shouting for help. A neighbor, who initially didn't recognize William due to his injuries, immediately called 911. Realizing the police would arrive soon, Joshua and Hayes tried to eliminate evidence. Hayes and Joshua doused Jennifer's lifeless body, various parts of the house including Michaela and Haley's bedroom, and also Michaela and Haley themselves with gasoline. Hayes and Joshua started a fire at the scene, unaware that the police had blocked off the area just a few miles away. Within 5 minutes, they collided with a police vehicle and were surrounded by officers. The two perpetrators, Joshua and Hayes, who were later identified as ex-convicts, were pulled from their vehicle and arrested. Meanwhile, the fire at the house was spreading rapidly. An ambulance arrived and took William Petit, was seriously injured, to the nearest hospital. Firefighters soon followed and attempted to put out the blaze. Once the fire was extinguished, they discovered a horrific scene inside the house. The first body they found was Jennifer's, which was badly charred and had rope around her ankles. On the second floor, they found Michaela tied to her bed, her body completely consumed by the fire. In a desperate bid to escape, Haley had managed to break free restraints but collapsed just a few meters away due to smoke inhalation. William had also managed to free himself and crawled to a neighbor's yard for help, but the neighbor didn't initially recognize him due to the severity of his injuries. Both Joshua and Hayes admitted to the murders during questioning. Detectives noticed that Hayes smelled of gasoline throughout her interrogation. However, each attacker claimed the other was the main person responsible for planning the home invasion. Joshua also accused William of being responsible for the murders. In his diary, Joshua referred to William as a coward, stating that William had the opportunity to save his family but chose not to. The trial of Hayes started on September 13, 2010, with a jury of 12 people, consisting of 7 women and 5 men. The defense team argued that Joshua was the mastermind behind the crime and was responsible for making it more brutal. On the other hand, the prosecutors believed that both Hayes and Joshua were equally responsible. After about 5 hours of discussion, the jury found Hayes guilty on October 5. The sentencing phase began on October 18, but the jury was initially torn between recommending life imprisonment or the death penalty. Hayes' defense team argued that life imprisonment without parole would be a harsher punishment. However, on November 8, the jury decided to recommend the death sentence for Hayes. Before the trial, Hayes had tried to negotiate a plea bargain for a life sentence, but the prosecutors wanted the death penalty. On December 2, 2010, Hayes apologized for the pain he caused the Petit family. He stated that death would be a welcome relief and hoped it would bring some peace to those he hurt. Judge John Blue sentenced Hayes to 6 death sentences and 106 additional years for other crimes. However, when Connecticut abolished capital punishment in 2015, Hayes' death sentence was changed to life imprisonment. The trial of Joshua Komisarjevsky began on September 19, 2011. His lawyers offered a guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty. They argued that Hayes was the one who directed Joshua. Joshua was found guilty on October 13, 2011, and the jury recommended the death penalty on December 9, 2011. During Joshua's sentencing, he expressed remorse and shame for the crime, claiming he never intended to kill anyone. The judge set an execution date of July 20, 2012, holding Joshua accountable for his actions. However, in August 2015, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment after Connecticut abolished capital punishment. William Petit, the lone survivor of his family, was released from the hospital after 4 days. Upon his discharge, he immediately attended the funeral service for his wife and daughters. Overwhelmed with guilt and grief, William struggled to come to terms with the devastating reality that his loved ones were truly gone forever.